I'm going to take a roll order. Okay, for everyone listening, I'm going to take a roll real quick. Terry Stoops,
Here.
John Eldridge, he'll be late. Bruce Friend,
Here.
Rita Hare,
Here.
Lynn Kroger,
Here.
Hilda Parlay,
Present.
Shelley Bowler,
Here.
Cheryl Turner,
Here.
Todd Godby, he'll be late today also. Eric Sanchez is absent. But we have a quorum, so we are good to go.
Okay, good morning. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Who's here? Would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The mission statement of the Charter School Advisory Board. The Charter School Advisory Board works to ensure the existence of high-quality charter schools in North Carolina. Our ethics statement. Board members are reminded that it is our duty to avoid conflicts of interest and the appearance of conflicts of interest as we handle the work of the Advisory Board. Does any member of the Advisory Board know of any conflict of interest or any appearance of conflict with respect to any matters coming before us in this meeting?
Madam Chair, I recuse from the ATA.
If so, please state them for the record. If during the course of the meeting you become aware of an actual apparent conflict of interest, please bring the matter to the attention of the chair. It will be your duty to abstain from participating in discussion on the matter and from voting on the matter. Okay, so I think the very first thing up is Mr. Whalen and NC Access Subgrade.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'm here to present two recommendations for subgrades for the NC Access program. We were going to do these separately because Mr. Eldridge was going to recuse from one, but if he's not here in time, I think we can just vote on them together. And then we do have an update to the timeline that we'll want your approval on, so we can take that back to the state board. So as a reminder, we have already awarded 60 school-level subgrades as part of the NC Access program, which meets our state goal. So these two additional awards, if recommended, would bring us to 62. We hold a separate timeline in the fall for replication applicants because of the necessity that those schools apply to this board for approval of a new charter. And so we had two applicants that submitted applications by the fall deadline, Central Carolina Academy and West Triangle High School. As a reminder as well, replications are a priority for not only our state, but for the federal CSP program more generally, and high schools are also a priority for our state and is a competitive preference for the CSP program more generally, and both of these schools are both replications of high-quality high schools. So the first recommendation before you, and you have access to the full recommendation report in eBoard, is for Central Carolina Academy. We are recommending approval of an award of $1.15 million for this school. They scored 88 points on the state board approved rubric, which is obviously above the 80-point threshold for a recommendation for approval. They're projecting 664 students with 55% educationally disadvantaged, and the school is obviously replicating a strong educational model and also has a comprehensive dual enrollment program. Central Carolina was approved by this board and by the State Board of Education for replication to begin operations. And they'll obviously also implement school lunch plans, transportation plans, weighted lotteries, and other requirements of the NC Access program. I'm happy to answer any questions about Central Carolina before I discuss West Triangle.
My question is just a curiosity question in general. Why is it that replication schools get so much larger grants than startup or implementation?
So there's a couple reasons. One, because those are priorities of our program and of the federal government for the primary purpose that they're replicating an existing and proven high quality model. and the replication of that school means there are a lot more seats that are going to be filled. So it's not just expanding a high-quality school or starting a brand new, potentially unproven model. It is replicating a brand new school of an existing high-quality model. So that's why they typically get the largest amounts. These two awardees, if awarded, would have the two largest amounts, and that is primarily based on their scores on the State Board approved rubric, as well as the numbers of students and percentage of educationally disadvantaged students that they're serving. And so West Triangle High School is recommended for an approval award of $1.25 million. They scored 97 points on the State Board approved rubric. They're projecting 600 students with 30% educationally disadvantaged, and then similar to Central Carolina, they are replicating a proven high-quality model of a high-performing high school in the Raleigh-Durham area. The one thing to note about West Triangle is their award will be contingent on being approved by this board and the State Board of Education for operation. They will come up for approval in the coming months.
What is their projected educationally disadvantaged? Because their current school has a very low number of educationally disadvantaged.
30%.
Any questions? Can I get a motion?
I move that we approve Central Carolina Academy and West Triangle High School.
Second.
To be approved for the summary.
It's been properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, can we take?
If you don't mind, can we do a roll call
Yeah.
vote? So we can document that
Yeah.
Dr. Eldridge did not vote.
Okay. Ashley, if we could do a roll call vote?
All right. Terry Stoops,
Aye.
John Eldridge is absent, Bruce Friend,
Aye.
Rita Hare,
Aye.
Lynn Kruger,
Aye.
Hilda Parlay,
Approved.
Shelley Bullard,
Aye.
Cheryl Turner,
Aye.
Todd Gottlieb is absent, and Eric Sanchez is absent, so it is approved unanimously.
Great. And so the other item is an update to the timeline. We mentioned to you all in September and the State Board in October that based on the outcome of these replication applications, we are obviously getting towards the end of the allotted funding that we have available for subgrants, and so that could affect future application cycles. And with these two awards, as I mentioned, now we have 62 awards that we've approved, which meets our goal of 60, but that only leaves us with about $150,000 remaining, and so we don't have enough money left to run another full application cycle and award any full subgrants. So the update and the amendment that we would like to make to take back to the State Board is we will use the remaining funds to provide supplemental funding and support for existing eligible subgrantees and not run another competition in the spring. So this would be the end of our competitive application process. And those supplements we would bring back to you for approval and then to the State Board, and that is based on schools that are meeting the goals and expectations of the program, have positive monitoring reviews and things like that.
Any questions? Can I get a motion?
I'll make a motion that we accept the recommendation for how they want to operate the sub-grant program. That wasn't really.
That's it.
It's been properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? Do we need to take a roll call?
No, not for, I don't think for this.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're ready to start.
Melanie, my screen is moving a little slow, so.
No problem. Good morning again.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Melanie Rackley, Office of Charter Schools. Today we have American Traditional Academies proposed management organization for the three application schools you'll hear from today: Centerpoint Classical, Liberty Classical, and Legacy Classical. So part of our process was the Office of Charter Schools actually went through a detailed list and meetings with the key folks at American Traditional Academies. We have the checklist here of the items that we requested. I'm going to go through some of those items to note really quickly. So, number one, if we can just pull up the organizational chart. That's fine. American Traditional Academies, they provided an organizational overview. They provided biographies of their partners. Mary Katherine Sauer, I believe Taft and Morley are both managing partners of American Traditional Academy. Part of that background includes Mary Katherine Sauer was involved and played integral roles in 3 schools that were opened in North Carolina: Cornerstone Charter, Piedmont Classical, and then Revolution Academy that opened in 2020. We also did, and we have it on eBoard, a board member list for these 3 proposed schools. Okay. Okay. So it's important to note that we also have the charter management agreement. So one key area of concern that I thought we should bring up is that in that charter management agreement, thank you, Ashley, you'll note that American Traditional Academies is listed as a limited liability company right in that preface, in that opening statement. Further down into that charter management agreement in Article 10, ATA, that's the warrants and representations. ATA represents that they are a nonprofit in good standing, authorized to conduct business in the state of North Carolina. At the time of our search, we could not verify that American Traditional Academies was listed as a nonprofit corporation. They are listed as an LLC with the Secretary of State. So within that charter management agreement, you do see 2 conflicts, whether they intend to operate as an LLC or if American Traditional Academies intends to operate as a nonprofit corporation. It was also important to note that Mary Katherine Sauer, in her previous visits in front of CSAB, there was a proposed CMO, Charter Development Solutions. They are an existing nonprofit association, so again, if clarification can be made as to what status and how they intend to operate the American Traditional Academy, that's one area of clarification. So other part, when we go back to that checklist, there were not any articulated conflicts of interest submitted. We do have the board member listing and their critical affiliations. That was part of the packet that was uploaded to eBoard. So again, we have that, but there were no articulated conflicts of interest. In terms of the financial information that was requested, within the applications, there is reference to and letters of support indicating that American Charter Development would actually provide $150,000 in startup costs for each proposed school. And so it's unclear as to whether or not that's a loan or a gift, et cetera. So we thought that there should be additional clarification made in regards to that. We did not, when we requested the financial information, we did not receive any, letters of credit from the bank. We did not receive any bank statements. There also, aside from the $150,000, there does not appear to be any other indication of any additional grants, loans, or donations. So specifically, the questions regarding the financial status of American Traditional Academies was an area that would require additional clarification. So we also asked whether or not the proposed management organization has submitted any petitions for any other states. At this time, we don't have any indication that they are operating or plan to operate in other states. And so again, with the existence of the charter development solutions, again, that's the only other entity that we see, and again, that was a CMO that Mary Katherine Sauer petitioned in front of you all previously. In terms of the school-specific information that we requested, there appears to be only one temporary site that has been identified by American Traditional Academies, and that is for the Legacy Charter Campus. So they've identified a temporary site. There are no temporary or permanent sites for any of the other schools, so we do not have proposed project addresses for those campuses, nor do we have any type of project schedule in terms of that. So when you look at the school-specific information that we requested, we don't have much by way of project sources. We don't have a project budget. There were no updates in terms of the status of the zoning permits and other environmental assessments. So again, there is somewhat of a narrative in this package as to how they intend to start looking, if approved, for these for the land and the permanent locations of these schools. So the other piece that we looked at as part of our due diligence search was in Article 4, Part E, where there's language to suggest that, if you want to move to that charter management agreement, Article 4, Part E suggests that American Traditional Academies can subtract any and all of the services out. So more clarification as to what they intend to subcontract or other areas of concern. So I'll stop there if there are any questions that you have as it relates to American Traditional Academies before we move into their application process. And do we have Mary Katherine?
Are they gonna be remote, or they weren't scheduled until 9:50, so they may just not be
I
here?
believe they will be here in person.
Okay, so,
Hope so.
can we go to the director's update in the interim then? So we've got a good little while till 9:50.
Do you want to do the director's updates?
But they don't have, they can pick it, they don't have to do that.
As far as State Board of Ed and OCS updates, at the last State Board of Ed meeting, they approved the relinquish of the North Raleigh charter, the school charter. They approved Envision Science Academy's request for a weighted lottery, and they also approved Shining Rock Classical Academy's request to change their mission statement. And they discussed the NC Access application and timeline, which Jay just presented to you, and they'll be voting on that at their next meeting. As far as OCS updates, we are in the final portion of the Charter School Teacher of the Year interviews. Our office, Dr. Jones, Ashley, and Claire, I believe, were on that committee. They interviewed probably roughly 15 teachers across the state, narrowed it down to 2 that they will be watching virtually, give a lesson and make that announcement. So then they'll be part of the statewide charter school, statewide Teachers of the Year. And we're also participating this year in the Principal of the Year, which more information will follow with that. As you know, the Office of Charter School is allowed to be the third-party verification for teacher evaluation tool, particularly for beginning teachers. By the end of this month, we'll have approved or validated 14 teacher evaluation plans. This is a great opportunity for the charter schools in the state to allow our office to be able to verify, but I can tell you it is an extremely heavy lift for our office to do the crosswalk.
And Dave, what we were told, and this was in the last week, was even if you have an approved tool, that you still have to use the NESIS for beginning teachers.
Absolutely not. And if your regional person is telling you that, if you'll send me an email and let me know who that is, we will. There is still some confusion out there. It's not a matter of us just quickly looking at it and approving it. We have to do the crosswalk. We have to send it back to teacher effectiveness to make sure that they're okay with it. But no, if we are allowed to be the third-party station. And we've, like I said, Dr. Jones has headed that process up and has done an excellent job with it. So we had a lot of schools that we had approved their evaluation tools before the 2016 State Board of Ed changed the policy. So those schools we have to make sure we're doing again. So, and we continue to have our office hours on non-CSAB Mondays. And through our stakeholder support workflow, we're going to start having head of school virtual check-ins. We're going to try to reach out to every leader, all 204 leaders in our state by the end of the year, to have a virtual check-in with them. Where the stakeholder support team, myself, will be on a virtual call just to, because we can't visit every school. That's just not possible to connect with them. Some schools we communicate with almost on a weekly basis. Some we don't have that much contact with. So we want to make sure we can improve the contact and just. I'm calling it a happy visit to the principal's office, where just so they know that we're here to serve them and ask them what support we can give and that sort of thing. So we're looking forward to that. Some of the new initiatives that we're going to try to do through the stakeholder support program, and also we are starting back up our counselor cohort, where all the guidance counselors in the state of the charter schools, that we divide them up into regions. We try to have virtual meetings, and then we're going to try to, when we have our Leadership Institute again, to have a breakout session just for our guidance counselors. We're hearing, obviously you know better than we do, that the social and emotional needs for our students is great this year, as it is for our staff. So we're hoping that we can help provide some service for that. And our risk assessment visits continue. In the RTO sessions, we just finished number 2. We'll have number 3 coming up soon. Been very successful. They've all been virtual, and that seems to have been very well received. Claire's doing an excellent job with those programs. The NC Access Fellows Institute continues. I want to compliment Jay and Barbara and her team for just having excellent Fellow Institute PDs. And we've got a couple really exciting ideas that we'll be presenting to you in the next couple months of how we can support our schools even more, how we can support the State Board of Ed's strategic plan and Superintendent's Polaris plan. We got some great ideas. I shouldn't say we, Dr. O'Neill has, and Jay have, they have some great ideas of how to we can support teachers and how we can support leaders. And several of us from our office attended the Coastal Prep ribbon cutting a couple weeks ago, which was very exciting, and it was a great event. And at that time, they announced that they're going to be continuing their school to a high school for next year. So, very exciting times. So, that's the report.
Thank you. Okay, so it's only 9:20, and they weren't scheduled till 9:50. So do we just take a break until then? Because I don't see anything else we can move up on the agenda.
Yeah, we could do that and maybe just wait until they come.
Yeah, until they, yeah, it sounds like they're in the hallway, yeah. So let's take a break and give them time to get in the door, and then we'll. And I have the email from the lady just this week. She said it doesn't matter who you just heard, you must use the next.
It was when was the first pre-2016, and we have to validate it again.
Yeah, but that, she didn't ask me was it approved, she just said, no, you must use the next. So we went back to it. Because we, and I'll have to contact them so we can get ours in together. For right now, we'll have to use the next. But what we're going to do is, we're using our tool, we have to transfer our training session, and The thesis is useless. Like, it's absolutely useless. It doesn't have instructions. And feedback, it's just a waste of time. If that's the only feedback, don't feel the feedback you teachers are getting.
We have schools that they thought they were going to, and they understand schools that each child has multiple initiatives.
That's what we're doing, we're just checking it off.
Could we be?
There has to be a ton of work. That's the problem. Do something. I just understood why I couldn't solve it. You know what I'm saying? I didn't try Explore, I tried to. Yeah. I couldn't.
I just forgot the name. Still be like, oh, and then like the way for the major explorers, be like, oh, there it is. It is the weirdest thing, but yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it's, other slows me down. My documents, all right, thank you.
I had to decide.
You said they just,
We used to have a lot of calls with years ago. I mean, now the idea just
where they get funded based on the people who
it's
understand
come a
why
long
Chris
way.
was back in 2009. They get some.
So next year, I'm going to a teacher has to pay for Two years after you finish. Yeah. I always do that for my doing. And people go through and go to places. And so now you're tired of going I go straight off to CMS salary scale. But that can be expensive. CMS has a lot of high salary. So for Christmas, it's kind of, we didn't know what time we were planning this. And one of the things we used to have $1,000 for Christmas. We're down to $500 now. We try to give, like last year, I also did a bonus and this year we need to do a bonus for the back. So, we try to do Christmas a bit of this month. So. How I address that was, the bonus is about your contribution for this year. If you were here this year, then you're entitled to the same. If the bonus is, if we were given a longevity bonus, then yeah, you get more than the first year teacher. We give a t-shirt.
We get 1%.
That's actually a good idea. That's actually a good idea. We were giving out t-shirts at that. Before that. I went from, when I got there 20 years ago, I had 40 teachers. I'm almost at 300. And I do think she was too big. And I want bonus. It's particularly if we get universal pre-K, is to start cutting that back by cutting back the number of kindergarten officers pre-K. And they really need to look at that. It's not sustainable. From all the support we want to provide, it's just not sustainable. At nearly 2,000 children, it's just well, people will also ready to see that. She worked there because it has an office, and she worked at that. And they didn't really know how to deal with the diversity. They had their own too, because they said some things that caused people to be really upset. But they learned over time. They've just taken on more responsibility. But both of them are retiring this year. I'm having to replace 2 people for. You know, you can't expect. My finance person staff, payroll staff, HR, that's all that. Nobody else is fixing it. till we get them to start school. But, you know, if you're the HR person, we're hiring people all summer long, that's, you know, we keep track of benefits and it's a lot, but she I mean, the people who are going to get out, you can't, it is cost prohibitive. Is her board not here yet? Board's not here yet.
I think most of them are here, I think they might be waiting for some of the virtual folks to log on.
Crossroads. Oh, that was it.
Yeah.
Crossroads. Charlotte, or we came back to Crossroads. All right, you guys, here we go.
You're coming in.
Make it streaming back on. All right, we are back live.
Okay. Good morning. Melanie Rackley, Office of Charter Schools. We'll begin our round one interviews for the ATA schools. The first one up today is Centerpoint Classical Academy. Just a reminder, this is a 60-minute interview. We'll do the 10-minute opening, followed by CSAB deliberation. There's a Q&A portion. Let's see. Can you just move to that? Okay, so the 10-minute opening statement by the board, 25-minute full CSAB discussion. Applicant will be allowed the 10 minutes to close, and then you all will make your decisions in that final 10 minutes. The three options for today is to send to forward to SBE for approval, forward to SBE for denial, or hold over for round two. So we'll just move into Centerpoint. And so we have a portion of their board here in the building, and then we have some members virtually. So Centerpoint Classical Academy is proposed for opening in Guilford County in year one, grades K-5 with 376 students, expanding to grades K through 6 with 565 students in year two. They grow by a grade in year three, K-7 with 646 students. They'll cap in year four with grades K-8 with 727 students. They will provide a reduced price matrix for food service for their students. They will not participate in the National School Lunch Program. Centerpoint Classical Academy does propose to use community bus stops and organized carpooling for their families. They will not utilize the weighted lottery. They do not have a facility, although they are proposed in zip code 27233, which is looks like it's in Climax, North Carolina, which is an unincorporated community that borders Guilford and Randolph counties. There was not an LEA impact statement submitted. Again, they are not a repeat applicant, and they do plan to utilize the EMO/CMO of American Traditional Academies. Assistance was provided by ATA in the creation of the application, which was deemed complete at the time of submission. If we can go to the map here again, where they're proposing in that zip code 27233. Again, it does border on that Randolph County side. So what you have there are the schools within a 5-mile radius there. So there are no actual charter schools within their proposed site, given what we know about the location of that zip code. So I will allow their board chair to come up and make their 10-minute opening statement. It looks like Mr. Snyder. Yep, and you have the floor, sir.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you. You're welcome. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to present our application for Centerpoint Classical Academy. really excited about this opportunity to bring this academy to the Southeast Guilford area. I'd like to begin by introducing myself. I'm Matthew Schneider. I'm a professor and administrator at High Point University in High Point. And I've got, are we all here? I've got my board here, and I want them, I'd like them to introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about them, and then when I get back at the end, I'll tell you more about myself. So, how about John?
Morning, I'm John O'Day. I'm the treasurer of the Centerpoint Academy Board. In my day job, I'm a consultant. I run a technology practice for a healthcare consulting company in the Malvern, Pennsylvania area. So we run a lot of large projects, and budgeting for those projects is something that falls upon me. So a good role for me as treasurer for this particular board. And I also serve on Summerfield Town Council. So we're used to, multi-million-dollar budgets that we create for our staff to execute on an annual basis. So again, I think I'm duly really well suited for the role in this particular board. Sorry, Matt.
Thanks. Who's next? Who would like to go? Brian is on his way in. Well, while he's coming in, then I'll introduce our principal, the principal of Centerpoint Classical Academy, Felicia Bowers.
Good morning, I'm Felicia Bowser. I currently serve as the assistant principal at Moorhead Elementary School in Guilford County Schools. I have been in the Greensboro area for approximately 20 years. I started my career in Houston, Texas. I am clinically trained with clinical psychology at Virginia Tech. I completed my undergrad degree at Fisk University, and I gained my add-on licensure for administration at High Point University in High Point, North Carolina. So it's a pleasure to be here this morning and to see all of you.
Thanks. And he's still not, are there board members here yet? Here he is, Brian Craven. We're starting a little bit early, and we're beginning with the introduction, so if you could just step up and introduce yourself.
Ready to just walk right into this.
Yeah.
Good morning. My name is Brian Craven. My background, and I'm with C.B. Richard Ellis, which is a commercial brokerage firm out of the Greensboro office, and I'm a native of the Triad area. I was born and raised in Jamestown, North Carolina. I live in Greensboro, North Carolina. And I'm happy to be here today. Thank you.
I'd also like to introduce Mary Katherine Sauer, who is with American Traditional Academies, and she's going to be here. She's here today as well to answer any questions that you might have. Mary Katherine.
Your two other board members just got the link, and so they should be hopping on shortly.
Okay. Two other board members just got the link. And where would I see that? Is that here?
It looks like is there a Kevin Johnson? Is he with you?
Kevin Johnson, no.
Derek Hawkins.
Derek, yeah.
Doesn't look like they're on yet, but once they're on, they will be able to unmute and you'll be able to hear and hear.
Okay, great. Well, then I will just introduce myself a little bit. As I said, I'm a professor of English literature at High Point University. I'm also the associate dean of the School of Humanities and Behavioral Sciences. And I've been teaching at colleges and universities for 35 years. This is my 35th year teaching. And I've been an academic administrator for 23 years. And I first heard about American Traditional Academies and about Centerpoint Classical Academy because I lived near Revolution Academy in Summerfield, North Carolina, and I saw it being built. And when I heard that the distinctive characteristic of Revolution was that they were going to offer a classical curriculum based on the core knowledge sequence, I immediately became interested, and I contacted Mary Katherine, who's the principal there, just to volunteer, just to offer my years of experience kind of advocating for a classical curriculum, for classical learning. any way that I could volunteer and help out the school. And she told me about the new schools that she was proposing, Center Point Classical Academy being one of them. And would I be interested in being on the board? And I said, absolutely, I would be interested in being on the board. I've never been on the board of a charter school before, but I have been on other kinds of boards and obviously many university committees, and I do have a long history of academic administration. So I'm familiar with how the operations of academic institutions work, and I thought I could bring that experience to bear on this new proposed charter school based on a classical curriculum. But the thing that I'm really excited about, and I know that our potential parents in Southeast Guilford are excited about, is the opportunity to bring this kind of a school to this area. I've been teaching, as I said, for 35 years, and I see students who have come out of both public and private schools, mostly public schools, I think. And I've seen the difference that a solid foundation in classical learning makes. They speak better, they write better, they have more confidence, and they have more curiosity. And as I've gone further and further through my career in colleges and universities, I've become more convinced of the necessity that curiosity has to be fostered as early as possible, and that knowledge is cumulative and obviously has to be built on a solid foundation. It also has to start very, very early as well. So I thought this is a great opportunity for me to realize some of the goals that I've had as an educator over these 3.5 decades, to be involved in a school like this where that solid foundation could be established. Because I've seen what a difference it makes both in the success of the students in college, but also in their success after college. Because the ones who are successful in college, who have this solid foundation and this grounding in classical learning and a wide range of knowledge about different subjects, they do better. They do better in school and they do better in life. And so anything I can do to help bring that along, I wanted to do that. So I contacted Mary Katherine about volunteering for this, and I'm very, very excited about the opportunity that I think it's going to afford me to realize one of my most longstanding professional and educational goals, which is to make the case for classical learning and make it as early and as often as I possibly can. So have our other board members come on yet? Derek, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Derek, we thank you for being here today, and I'm sorry you couldn't be here in person, but we started with just the board members introducing themselves. Could you just say a little bit about who you are and why you're interested in serving on the board of Center Point Classical Academy?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Derek Hawkins. I'm a pastor of a multi-ethnic, multicultural church, campus pastor of a church called the Refuge Church in Greensboro. We're located in East Greensboro, near A&T University off of Bessemer Avenue. I'm also author of a book called Welded: Forming Racial Bonds That Last. And I've been intrigued by relationship with Mary Katherine for the last few years. I feel the need to have a type of education in the eastern part of Greensboro. Of course, our school and our church was devastated by a tornado back in 2018. Irwin Montessori School. Since then, we haven't had the opportunity to have a school rebuilt, and schools were actually combined in different communities. And I felt that one of the things that was needed is to be a part of a board that would allow for education to be provided in southeastern Greensboro. And I just looked at the privilege of being a part of such an astute school. Of course, I have some prior knowledge of Revolution and what what they've literally done in revitalizing that community and education with their school. I had an opportunity to even tour Summit, and it was amazing. And I felt if we had an opportunity to bring that type of education inside of our community, and the eastern part of Greensboro could be awarded an opportunity for quality education within a charter school, I would love to be a part of it. So that's why I decided to be a part of this board. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Derek. And John Brewer, can you hear me? So, no, John? Okay. Well, I see that we're at our 10-minute limit, so I thank you so much for listening to these introductory remarks, and we're happy to welcome your questions.
Thank you. Okay, board, at this time is our opportunity to ask some questions. Let's start out with what are some of the things that people are interested in knowing more about?
I'll start. So thank you for that introduction. Questions that I have will center around sort of the following. One, I'd like to dive into the contract itself that the board proposes with ATA. I have some questions about the financials of that, as well as the termination clauses that are listed in that contract. I'd like to know why, so this board came together with the focus of wanting to bring high-quality charter school to this area. Why did they choose ATA? Why not try to do this on their own? If they were going to partner with a management company, ATA's new. This would be their very first school. So why ATA versus a established EMO with a track record? Time allowing, I'd like to dig into the education plan as well and get a sense of the board in terms of what the core knowledge curriculum assessments that they're going to be utilizing, some of the staffing. I'll stop there. I'll let people.
Okay, so
we're going to first kind of put all the questions out there, and then we'll go through them.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I also have questions regarding around ATA and the contract as well. Just really the current infrastructure for them to handle all the operations, the accounting and the administrative functions. Again, being brand new, just kind of elaborate how they would be able to handle that. Even from a financial perspective, the $150,000 that's going to be startup cost, will that be a loan or would that be a gift? And also just, again, some of the contract terms, maybe just kind of discuss the contract and your understanding of the contract, and that might lead to more questions.
I have questions around some of the language in the contract as well. I can't see in the budget what ATA gets paid, and so, but I don't see in the contract either. And so how that's structured in terms of what is ATA's fee for managing the school. So I too have some questions around that contract and how it's set up.
And I'd like the applicants to speak to the need. It's difficult to consider this application in isolation from the other two. So I'm really thinking about this in terms of three, even though that we're just considering this first one. But just to generally speak about the need for charter schools in this region. What is the educational atmosphere in Guilford, Rockingham counties? Make the case for the educational provisions that is in this charter for those students in that area.
I have a question about, similarly, I'd like to hear the charter management company arrangements addressed, but also just the fact that there's a lot of redundancy in board service, so that 3 of your board members are also serving on a second school that would be trying to start at the same time. And again, as Mr. Stutes pointed out, the same thing occurs with the other boards. In fact, multiple members serving on multiple boards, they'll have a huge task, a heavy lift ahead of them. And one, in fact, is 1 or 2 are actually serving on a current board, so that would make 3 boards. So we serve on boards and we understand the kind of commitment and the attention that it takes and the resources that it takes, and to think that, and I think you have a strong board, I think you've put together a great set of individuals with skills and credentials and achievements, but this is still quite a bit to ask of individuals to come together. And if it was just one, that had to carry all of that, but in fact, with this school board, there are 3 of you. So that's a concern.
Any other questions? Okay, well, let's start there.
All right, so the first question that came up was why ATA, why not some other EMO, why not another management organization? And from my standpoint, and I'll invite the other board members to speak to this as well, and I'm sorry I said Bowers, it's Bowers, right? Sorry about that. From my standpoint, I think there's at least two things that really are at the forefront of the decision to go with ATA and not some other management organization. The first is local knowledge. This is a local group. It's not a big national organization, and I think that local knowledge will be very important in speaking directly to the needs of the areas that we're looking at. So in Guilford County, we're all residents of Guilford County. We know, and Rockingham County. I'm on two of the boards that are in Guilford, and then there's another one in Rockingham. But we're familiar with this area, and ATA is familiar with this area, and I think that's a big part of it. The other big factor for me, at least, in choosing ATA is that the others don't have the combination of the core knowledge curriculum with that local control and local knowledge. And I'm a huge believer in the core knowledge curriculum. I know there's some questions about that too. But I have looked at it pretty carefully, and based on my experience, both from my own educational background and also from 35 years of teaching in colleges and universities, I see that the way that curriculum is scaffolded with basic knowledge at the bottom, and then you continually add on to that basic knowledge, broadening the base, but also going further up the pyramid to more complex kinds of concepts. That's precisely what students need to be able to succeed in their later educational endeavors, and then I think also to become lifelong learners and to emerge from their whole educational experience with a kind of curiosity that can sustain them through the rest of their lives. So those two factors, local control, local knowledge, and the curriculum, the classical curriculum, are the two most important features for me for why ATA. Is there, yeah, go ahead, Alicia.
And I would just like to speak in terms of a general sense as a prospective administrator of the school and why an EMO in general. I just consider the time commitment to running a school and being an instructional leader and not having the level of commitment in the business piece of it as much that would free me up to literally be an instructional leader, provide my teachers with professional development that they need, provide my families with the customer service that they need, and also provide the community with the partnerships that are necessary to make the school successful.
Also, with ATA, we get folks that have run schools in the past. They certainly know how to run a school on a day-to-day basis. We get teacher recruitment, marketing, so all those things can be collaborated across all three. If you want to talk about all three schools, and as well as ATA also has the funding to help us with startup costs, building acquisition. Things that don't have to be difficult for us as board members because we have that support.
What funding? My understanding is the funding is $150,000 per school. What funding are you talking about that they have to do startup?
That funding, sure. That's it. And I think to answer the question, I think one of the questions was, what is that? That's a loan. We have in the contract clause, we can terminate the contract in 90 days without cause if we so choose. I mean, that's certainly not what we want to do. We believe that the contract needed an exit strategy from being here 2 years ago. We have that if we need to exercise it. But relationships with between partners don't go south overnight, and we plan to do monitoring on at least a monthly basis. And we'll monitor progress toward all our goals, at least that often. So if things are not going in the direction we want, we'll certainly want to mitigate, the issues that we have, and drive toward making this a successful school. We're all in this together for the kids, and we certainly believe that all of us working together will create a great educational opportunity for kids in areas, in this particular area of Guilford County that's underserved.
What other funds do you have access to for startup? Because $150,000 doesn't go very far.
Do you want to handle that? It's our treasurer.
I mean, we certainly, the $150 or $150,000 credit line is certainly an option to us. We will also look at other fundraising opportunities, bonds. We don't know who, in this particular model, we're not sure who will own the school at this point, whether that's the management company or us. We're going to sit down and we're going to work that out. If we have the opportunity of building a municipal bond, putting together a bond package, we'll own the school. But we want to do it, again, we want to do this together as a team, because that's what we are, and we're all here to serve kids. Members of ATA do come from American Charter Development. They have built about 100 schools. So they have built 100 schools. Revolution Academy, which was just built, does give us a model, a school model, but also a model for securing the bonds to build one. So we have, again, some experience we can leverage, all local to us, as far as the building of the school experience, the financial backing of American Charter Development as we need it, if we need it, and again, as we work together to put the school in place for the kids.
You mentioned that there's a 90-day exit clause, but based on my understanding of this contract, there is a 90-day exit clause, but you would have nothing if you exited. Your staff doesn't belong to you, your building doesn't belong to you, so you would essentially have nothing. You could exit, but you take the clothes on your back, kind of thing.
Yes, that's correct.
This is also the same model NHA uses. National Heritage Academies. They own the building. They own all the staff are employed.
They don't
by
own
them.
their staff though.
They don't own the staff. The staff don't report to them.
They might own the principal, but they don't own the staff.
Okay. Well, I know that they own buildings. We would, that would be negotiation that we would have to go through to exit the contract. Is what do we do with the staff? Do we keep them, or do we employ them directly? If that's the direction we have to go, that's something we would just need to work out.
Ms. Sauer, at this point, we just want to talk to the board.
I'm confused a little bit on the contract itself, because I'm looking what was provided to us to review, and it goes from Article 7, which talks about personnel and training, and then it goes into Article 9. Looks like there's a page missing, like page 10.
And then Article 3 says something about term, but then there's nothing there.
Yeah, so on this issue of termination, it spells out the school may terminate, and it gives the reasons for the school to terminate, but it doesn't give the reasons. There's not a where it's what if ATA wants to terminate.
3-term.
So I'm looking at just the page numbers alone. It looks like we're missing page 10.
And looks like page 4 is also missing. Would that be?
Okay, well,
Yeah,
while they're
it
looking for
is.
that, we can go ahead and we'll come back to that.
Yeah, because there's an important, and the reason I noticed that was compared to the other applicants that we're seeing later this morning. There was a clause in there that concerns me greatly about ATA terminating the agreement that's not in your agreement. So I didn't know if that was purposely taken out, that it concerned you as well, or maybe it's in there and we're just not seeing it.
This is if we only have the odd numbers?
No, it's, yeah, it looks like that's the case in this contract. Anyways, let's move on. We'll come back to that.
Yeah, and the contract does state, you had said you hadn't determined yet whether you guys would own the facility or ATA would own the facility, but the contract specifically says that ATA would secure a facility. So, again, I just want to make sure you guys understand the terms of this contract. And also the 150 startup costs, you said that's a loan, and then it also, in the contract, discusses about if you run a deficit, that there would also be a loan, and the terms of that loan would be determined later. So it just seems, reading through this contract, it seems there's a lot of things that have not been determined and kind of outlined. So it's very vague, and I think it really kind of exposes you as a board to have so much vagueness in the contract that it does cause concern.
Particularly in that particular clause, ATA develops the budget, ATA pays all the bills. They have it says ATA reserves to itself the right to designate the means and methods of accomplishing the objectives and purposes of this agreement. So they make all the decisions. If they overspend, you have a loan. That doesn't work well.
We approved the budget. The board approves the budget. So, and we monitor, and we do monitor the expenditures against the allocations. If we think we're going in the wrong direction, then we'll have to make some adjustments in where we're spending money. That's just I think that's just the nature of what we'll have to do. We're not going to allow them to, quote, spend us into a deficit without us being involved in that decision.
I'm curious if we go back onto the education plan a little bit, starting K through 5 with the core knowledge sequence. Your students who are coming in as first graders through fifth graders will have no experience with this classical approach. So how do you anticipate preparing those students to utilize, and those teachers too, to utilize core knowledge? What will you use in terms of strategies to assess where they're at, as opposed to
all the students when they come in, and Felicia can tell you more about this, but they'll all be assessed as they come in, and then we have several mechanisms in the school, a multi-tiered support system, and also ongoing teacher development and education to help with precisely that situation. But Felicia can tell you more about that.
Yes, just to elaborate, we will use the NWEA map testing to find out where students are. We will also use the MTSS system of support, multi-tiered intervention system. But also, one thing that you touched on that will be critical, and that is the development of our teachers in terms of how to differentiate as they introduce this core knowledge, and also the basis of core knowledge is there is a lot of spiraling. So students may come in and not have as much knowledge, but by being in the core knowledge curriculum over the course of an academic school year, they will have multiple touch points in terms of the information that is provided to them. And of course, we will also utilize our teachers' knowledge themselves of the curriculum based on their training in terms of how to be flexible, in terms of focus on particular areas of the curriculum, and then other areas that may not need as much focus. So it will definitely be a partnership with our teachers, our curriculum coordinator, as well as the information we gain from the assessments that are given to the students.
Let's talk about this. The board members who are serving on multiple boards of starting up schools and an existing school.
Well, I can see that may look from the outside like redundancy, but you could also see it as if maximizing efficiency, since the schools are using a similar approach. They're not identical, but they're very close. They're pretty close in terms of their with the management contract with ATA, the curriculum. I think it may be actually helpful to have board members on multiple boards, because they can bring them the familiarity that they gain from service on one board to the other schools as well. We don't have identical roles on the boards, of course. I'm on another board as well, but I'm not the chair. But I think that actually maximizes our efficiency and allows us to use our experience in not just one way. So my educational experience is going to be more valuable on one board, and my administrative experience may be more valuable on another board. John, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I can add. Since I'm also serving on 2 boards, I'm a high energy guy. I told when Mary Katherine when we were getting the layouts, I'll serve on as many boards as you want me to. In all honesty, because I'm highly passionate about helping kids, and I believe that charter schools really set a great direction. I'll talk a little bit more about it in our next meeting. But my daughter is a product of 7 years of charter school education. I've seen what her and her classmates have become as people, both as well as their education knowledge. So I'm really passionate about putting schools in other parts of Guilford County where we can help kids. I love what I've seen in my 7-year experience, and I'm driven to help other folks obtain the same type of education that kids I've seen come up through some of the charter schools have. As far as my ability, I think some of our ability to serve on 2 boards, I think all of us that are serving on multiple boards feel the same way. Something we can do.
I don't think I'm questioning your energy,
Oh.
but you still have 24 hours a day, and and having been doing this a long time, I know how much work startup is.
Sure.
And multiple startups would be, it multiplies. And so the amount of time it takes, the investment it takes to start up, to manage that in multiple boards would be extremely challenging, I would think.
2 other things we also could, one, we do have the backing of ATA to help us. That takes a little bit of the load off of the individual boards. But we also have the ability to expand to 7 members, and we certainly haven't stopped looking for other folks that would want to serve, and we can very easily expand any of the boards to 7.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm as high energy as John is, but I'm very, very thrilled by this opportunity, and I feel like at this point in my career, this is the right thing for me to be doing. So I understand your point about it being a lot of work. I know it's going to be a lot of work. Know that ahead of time, but I can't really think of a reason not to do it, and not to really stretch my capabilities as far as they can be, because I do so firmly believe in the mission of the school and the mission of this kind of education. And as John said, we can bring on more board members if necessary.
Talk to me about your confidence in and what supports your confidence in ATA's ability to do 3 of these at one time.
Well, ATA, Mary Katherine and the other folks at ATA have the experience of starting these schools before. Now, I don't think they've ever started 3 at once, but they do have the experience of starting these schools, and Revolution Academy is very successful. So, based on that track record, I think, yes, it is a little bit of a leap of faith, since this is the first time that ATA will be doing this. But I'm confident, based on my experience in the field, that they have the ability to do this, and I'm also confident, based on their own track record of having started these new schools, that this is something that's going to be possible. If I thought it wasn't going to be possible, I wouldn't put myself in this position, definitely. But I have confidence in ATA because of their track record of success, and also because I think I can bring my energy and my expertise to help them wherever they need it. Go ahead.
And I also think that my leadership will help balance some of that as well, in terms of the day-to-day and actually running the school and providing the support instructionally for my staff, being kind of the front runner for the school within the community, and relying on the board as they rely on ATA for those areas of need that may go outside of the scope of running the school and the day-to-day operations instructionally, as well as with the parents and the community. So I see it more as a balanced band of stakeholders so that no one will be overloaded in any particular area, but that the communication will be such that we will work interdependently so that we will achieve our goal of educating the students and providing them with this rigorous classical educational platform.
Will you be working for the school during the RTO year?
Say that again.
Will you be working for Centerpoint during the RTO year?
No.
Okay, so
So you said
during the year that the preparation year,
Yes.
the planning year, would you?
Yeah.
So would you start working for them once
Yes,
they have
yes,
a charter
yes,
this year?
yes, yes,
And you'll be
yes.
working for them full time.
part-time. Yes.
So you will continue to still be the assistant principal at the school where you are.
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to touch on, you mentioned, you were asking about how we felt about different board members being a part of different charter schools, and you got to understand the board members are the governing body, whereas we'll look to ATA for the management and the operation. So I think there would be, even with a lot of energy and a lot of passion tied to all of us board members, there is enough time to potentially work on a couple different boards, being a governing board member, not in operations and management. We're going to be overseeing all this. It's my take on that question you asked.
We did. We checked our hard copies of the contract and the charter management agreement, and ours are intact.
Okay, the one that got submitted, at least for this school,
I don't know whether
is
it was
not.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. I don't know whether it was a PDF glitch, but ours are intact 1 through 15, pages 1 through 15.
If the school was to be approved, that would need to get added to the application because it's critical that the contract be there.
Okay.
Understood.
Yeah, so is this contract, so that we know what we're looking at then, is this contract basically the same as the contract with the other proposed schools? Because we're looking at
Yes.
an agreement that's half there, and we can only make decisions on
Right,
what's in front of
yes.
us.
In my copy, there are some missing pages. But I have the other, the Liberty copy.
You should have the full contract in the due diligence report I sent you. So if you're looking for, because we were given one contract for all 3 ATA schools, so it should be the same, just.
That pulled this one out of it.
They're the same.
Out of
Adlusion, yeah.
Adlusion,
Yeah,
excuse me.
yeah, it might not be an inclusion, but just if you need it.
But the contract is the same for all 3, so.
So I guess what, and I know we're up against time, and I really do have questions about the academic and education
We still
plan.
got it. We still got it.
We still have some time. That's right. I'm just concerned about this clause in the termination agreement where it says, it's the ATA may terminate the agreement, and it gives the reasons why. And one of the reasons the ATA can terminate the agreement says a decision by the board not to adopt ATA's recommendations to a specific policy, rule, or regulation. So it seems to me that that's putting the board in a position of, if you don't do what ATA wants you to do, they can just pull the contract out from underneath you. And it's loosely written. So what does that mean in practice? If your head of school just sort of determines that we don't have enough EC teachers, and I want to hire additional EC teacher, but the management company is not on board with that, are you violating a recommendation of a specific policy, rule, or regulation? Who's in control? You as the board or ATA?
We, as the board, are in control, and this is something that I've made clear and asked and made clear with Mary Katherine several times, but the board is in control. The board is not in any way a pro forma body to approve the recommendations of ATA. I wouldn't get involved in it if that were the case. I know of such boards, such governing boards from my experience in higher ed, and it never works out right. So I insist, at least as the chairman of the board of Centerpoint, that the board will have those decisions. Now, of course, there are possibilities. As it's written, there is a possibility that ATA will make a recommendation that the board will not want to accept, and I just have to have faith in both the integrity of the board and the integrity of ATA to work that out in good faith. Yeah, it could happen that if it comes to the point where we just can't agree, there is that possibility of one side terminating the contract, and the board can terminate the contract as well, which is an important aspect of that board control in the final analysis. But I see my role as chairman of the board in maintaining the board's position as the body that makes the determinations, and ATA as the operations side of it that brings into being and puts into effect the board's standards and representations. Now, of course, it's collaborative. We're going to listen to their suggestions and recommendations because of their professional expertise, but ultimately I see it as the board's decision.
You said it, but I was going to touch base. If you read, and you can read into that many different ways, but both the board plus ATA has the opportunity to terminate. So it's not just ATA terminating for any and all reasons, also the board. So you can read into that in however you want to. And there's options for termination, but in general, both parties have the opportunity to do that.
I understand that. I don't want to go down a rabbit hole here. I think you're absolutely right in terms of what the board chair's responsibility and all board members' responsibilities are. That clause gives me concern because the financial arrangement is that so when I look at your budget, there's no ATA gets X percent of revenues. It's ATA is going to get their revenue if there's a surplus, basically, right?
Right.
After all after you've got your revenue and all your expenses have been paid, what's left over is going to ATA. I'm making up an example. I just wouldn't want you to be in this situation. Let's suppose there's a surplus projected at $60,000, $100,000. But as an administrator of the school, you're desperate for additional staffing. You're desperate for an additional AEC teacher. You're desperate for additional materials to run your school. I mean, are you going to find yourself in a position where your EMO is saying, no, we're not going to spend anything more? And if you don't abide by that,
We can walk.
they can walk away.
Take your staff,
they can fire
take
you
your building.
versus the other way around.
What would be an alternative arrangement? Because you have to have something in this sort of an agreement where both sides can agree to terminate. But what would you recommend as a better way of doing
Set fees
that?
would make it easier because the issue here is all of your money goes to ATA. And so you really don't have control over your money.
Mm-hmm.
And the fee then becomes, the incentive is to have as much surplus as possible because that becomes the fee.
Right.
So you really have no control over the fee.
I'm most concerned about this clause 4. That's to answer your question specifically on termination, section A, clause 4. A decision by the board not to adopt ATA's recommendations. That's clearly, that's a reason for terminating the contract. That puts you as a board in a position where, real or implied, you better follow what they want, what your EMO wants you to do.
And that makes plenty of sense. I think, we can all look at working relationships. If we're going to go into, the board's going to go into ATA coming in to secure the financing for a potential new school, to develop and build that new school. They're vested in that property. They're vested in the operations. They're vested in running the school. with positive cash flow, with positive teachers in place. I think, you can look at the scenario of worst case scenario, or you can look at blue sky scenario. If we're going to be working together with them as a governing body, relying on them to provide us with management, operations, education, and then you should probably also look at the best case scenario on the other end, if you see my approach there, because contractually, you could read into that contract and see that there's opportunities for everybody to get out of it. Things could turn upside down, but I think the plan that we're putting in place would necessarily not reflect.
Yeah, well, there's no doubt that if given the school, it's in nobody's best interest to have to go down the termination path. But just.
But we've had it
But we have to think of all scenarios.
Got it.
We've had it
That's
happen.
why we're here today, to talk about this stuff, the fun stuff. So,
Okay, well, actually, our time for discussion is over.
Can I add one more thing, ma'am?
Sure.
Please, thank you. We can strike that clause if that's a condition of approval. We would be willing to strike it.
Okay, I get they give their closing, I think, now. You have 10 minutes for your closing.
Okay, well, again, I just want to reiterate that we're very excited about this opportunity for the southeastern Guilford area to have a charter school based on our rigorous classical curriculum. And we know that there's a lot of interest for this in Guilford County because of the waiting lists for other charter schools, including Revolution Academy. We know that people are eager to give their children the kinds of advantages that are afforded by a rigorous classical education and by the core knowledge sequence, and by the emphasis on character also that is really the hallmark of what we're trying to do at Centerpoint Classical Academy. So I'm thrilled to be a part of this. I really didn't know how thrilled I would be to be a part of this, but after 35 years in colleges and universities, it's just become so obvious to me that the secret to improving education and improving the outcomes for our college students lies in starting as early as possible. And so I can't really think of a better way to kind of cap my career as an education professional than by helping Centerpoint Classical Academy get going. And again, it's that local control, that local knowledge, our understanding of the area, our understanding of the kind of needs and desires that are out there among parents, and our deep faith in the power of a classical education to really turn things around for people, for our students and for their families. So I'll invite my other board members to make their closing statements as well.
Again, thank you all for hearing us this morning, and I just want to share with you Centerpoint Classical Academy is already a special part of me. I have named the school, I gave the motto, and it speaks to my history and my legacy as a student. I was educated both privately and publicly in grade school as well as in college, and I have an appreciation for a well-rounded education steeped in classical learning on pillars of those things that we can rely on beyond time. I have a goal of leaving a legacy and a foundation with scholars, something we don't hear a lot anymore, the word scholars, but preparing students as scholars, giving them instruction and giving them an education that is portable and transferable, that no matter where they find themselves and no matter what they choose to do with their career or vocation, they have a center point. They have a center point in which they gained the basic foundational skills that were necessary for them to either expand, to build upon, or just to carry in order for them to navigate as a citizen who is ready to contribute to their community as well as to the world. The motto is let knowledge be your center. And so my message to students and families will be the more knowledge that students are able to gain, the more choice students have in terms of where they see themselves, where they want to go, who they want to be, how they want to be seen as that person, as that scholar, as that citizen. And so I'm excited about the work. I've been an educator all my life. I've been in education since 2 years old in preschool. I've always been on concrete floors, and so I'm ready to continue that work. I'm ready to continue to make those connections within the community, and I'm ready to commit myself to another generation of students who need me just as much as I need them. And thank you so much for your attention.
I'm not following that. Yeah, I was going to say the same.
All right, well, thank you again for the opportunity to present this. Thank you so much.
All right, so this is our opportunity to discuss.
Before we get into the deeper portion of it, we didn't discuss the budget at all. And I know some of the budget is just, there's a lot of unknown. Basically, the facility is unknown, and that's a huge determinant. But they do have a line item called phone that has $25,000 in it, years 2 through 5, and they need to look at that. I'm sure that must be an error which could contribute to the surplus funds at the end. But year 1, it has 2,500, and the remaining years it has 25,000.
Yeah,
coming
that's
out
a
of the budget
typo.
for phone.
Yeah.
So needs another look.
Other comments? What are people thinking?
I have questions about, and like you said, we didn't get into it, but I have questions about the educational plan that we just didn't have time to dive into. So.
I do think this is a strong board with some real skills. I'm really impressed with the prospective school leader. I, however, have real concerns about capacity. And at this point, the capacity of the board, because that's who we're talking about right now, and being on multiple boards of startups. I have some real concerns about that. And we're talking, not only are we talking about board members who are going to be on more than one startup board, we're talking about a management company that's going to be doing more than one school, or that is proposing to do more than one school. And that's just a whole bunch of division going on that I'm not comfortable is possible, or is possible to get done well. I'm not a big fan of the contract. I just feel like the board, I hear the board, and they're absolutely capable, and they understand what boards do. I feel like this contract cuts them off at the knees and doesn't give them the opportunity to do the things they're thinking they're going to be able to do. I don't see that kind of authority in that contract.
And their instructional leader as well. I believe she is super strong, and I think that contract, the trickle-down theory from holding the board and cutting the board off at the knees, I would trust to her to not to be the instructional leader and not quite give up the business part, as you noticed, because I think she is super strong and has the ability to do that.
What other people are thinking?
I mean, we asked, it's not Phoenix, Greenville Prep to expand their board. And I think that'd be a reasonable request for this board to get new members. They seem to indicate that there's a willingness to expand their board and perhaps have board members dedicate themselves to one school rather than multiple schools. And so I'd love to give them the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, I wrote down several notes here. What I put down on my strength side was certainly the commitment of the board, the capabilities of the board. I think questions about the education plan, but I will say I am a fan of core knowledge, use it at our school. And certainly can see why they chose the prospective head of school that they've selected. The concerns I wrote down was the budget. I'm specifically, I guess one of the questions I have on the budget is when you're, at least the question I asked them about the implementation of core knowledge, which is going to be new to these students and for the most part probably new to the staff as well. And There's 24 staff, if I remember correctly, and only $12,000 put in professional development. So you can do the math. That's $500 per teacher for professional development to implement a brand new school, new curriculum. I think there's some concerns
And
there.
that's a heavy lift.
That's a heavy lift, having done it. Would maybe like to see, to your point, Mr. Stoops, maybe a little bit more K-12 experience on the board as well. It's not uncommon for new applicants that come before us and not have the facility situation ironed out, because it's not a requirement for when this is not an acceleration. But to not even know who's going to own it, that's different. It's one thing you don't know where it's going to be, how much, but to not even have yet figured out in the contract who actually owns the facility raises the question. And then the ready to open year is a huge lift, and I think she seems to me to be very capable, but to be splitting time during that ready to open year while you're part-time in another job, coupled with you have board members who will have their time split between multiple schools. Again, having done it, not that model. I think that's a concern. I'm just putting it out there. That's a concern. I don't know if the enrollment numbers are a stretch. I don't think they are. I guess it's trying to put it into context as to whether or not some of these other schools get approved that are also in that general area, but I don't think the enrollment numbers on paper look to be a real stretch. So I don't really know if that's a strength or a concern. It just is. And then I share, Ms. Turner, your concern about, ATA, just a brand new EMO, a staff of 3 people, and potentially 3 schools to manage. I just think that's a huge undertaking. And I wonder where the financial backing is of all of that to pull that off. I mean, potentially 3 schools in a ready to open year process. And the only numbers I'm hearing is $150,000 per school. I mean, right there is some of that money's tied into the part-time head of school, the first, let alone. So there's my strengths and concerns.
Just a reminder to speak directly into the mics as loud as possible, so our live stream people need to hear.
All right, thank you.
Yes, I too agree that this is a very strong board. I've been very impressed with the board and your expertise. And again, my biggest concern is this contract. I mean, as a school board, you want to have control to be able to manage the school and manage all the important pieces. And I don't feel like this contract gives you that level of confidence to be able to do that. And yes, I understand it's a relationship, but from a legal standpoint, you really need to have in the contracts more stipulations that allows you that control. I mean, the way it's written now, ETA runs everything. They run the day-to-day operations. They are in charge of recruitment. They're in charge of hiring. They own the facility. I mean, if they want to subcontract out, they have a right to subcontract out all aspects of services. And when it comes to the budget, yes, you may prepare the annual budget and put that into place, but based on this contract, ATA is responsible for the handling of all the day-to-day issues with that budget, and so it's really putting that budget in their hands to perform all those duties. And I think the contract just needs to be tightened up significantly more. It's my opinion.
Is anybody prepared to make a motion? So let me review what our options are. We can approve the school to go forward to RTO. We can request that they return for a second interview with specific questions that we would supply and discuss at the second interview, or we can vote not to move the school forward. Is anybody prepared to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to not move the school forward at this time.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been properly moved and seconded. Any discussion?
I think that's a difficult decision. We've all articulated what a strong board this is and a strong school leader, and a good plan with some tweaking. I think it's the contract and the new ATA and the heavy lift of trying to do this 3 times in 1 year. I hate to see it terminated. I hate to see everything just stopped here. The need in the community, the strength of the curriculum, what it can do for kids, and when you just think about being able to move this forward, but I think we all see that some changes need to be made. And we'd like to see the contract work more in favor of the school and have some very definitive, specific terms that they know their outcome and they know what they own, they know what they control, and it's different from how it currently reads. So it's difficult for me to vote not to move them forward. I don't think I would. But to have them come back if they want to make some changes that we would specify or recommend, and see if they could come back with a little better plan. And I understand that what we do here with a Centerpoint could have an impact on liberty and legacy. We're going to go through this through the day. Don't know that we want to ask all 3 to come back. I don't know what we want to do, but.
Well, and then the issue of, can they come, this is the application they submitted.
Right.
Can they come back with another contract at this stage? And that would be, that's a major change to the application,
Right.
and I don't think that's possible.
Yeah, I that's where my head is on that very issue. Like, I think of the applicants that we've interviewed and we've asked to come back, and it's to get clarity on a budget or to have a little bit more time to talk about the education plan.
Not reworking.
But they're not able to, they're not allowed to spend the next 30 days renegotiating a contract with their prospective EMO. I mean, they submitted this as the plan, and yeah, I'm not sure how if we're concerned about the relationship or the way the contractual relationship with the EMO is, that's not something that the second interview allows for a change on.
Do we have other schools using EMOs that have similar contracts?
NHA has a similar contract. Not exactly. The financial arrangement's the same. The boards really have a little more say about inherent in the contract. The board has a little more say.
But NHA, all revenues go into the account?
Yes.
I thought I had read
Yes.
that.
Yes. But NHA also brings a lot of revenue to the table.
Mm-hmm. On the front end?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Is it a loan? Is it in the form of a loan, or is it structured differently?
Well, they accept if the school is a deficit, they cover the deficit. That's not a loan that you have to pay back. They do provide the facility, and that's, you get that back in the lease over time, and their lease does escalate over time.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things we didn't really dive into on this one either, was if there is a deficit,
it becomes a loan.
The EMO is not covering the deficit. The EMO is going to write the terms of a loan to the board, but again, in the contract, it doesn't say what. And I realize you can't predict 3 to 5 years out what the terms of the loan may be, but. And again, I think this is a board that's probably is capable and committed. It has, I don't know, it has, like, we're putting a puzzle together, the borders are there. There's just some pretty critical missing pieces, I think.
Any other discussion? All right, we need to take a vote on this motion. The motion is to not move Centerpoint forward to ready to open. Ashley, could you please take a roll call vote on this one?
Okay, Terry Stoops,
Nay.
John Eldridge,
I just walked in and
abstain.
You can
abstain.
abstain.
You can abstain.
Bruce Friend,
Aye.
Rita Hare,
Nay.
Lynn Kroger,
Aye.
Hilda, you're recused, correct?
Yes.
Shelley Bowler,
Aye.
Cheryl Turner,
Aye.
Todd Gomby.
Aye.
Can you say that again, Todd?
Aye.
Aye. All right, it is 5-2, it passes.
Okay, thank you. So I think we have, do we have closed session next or lunch?
No, we have
Liberty
Oh, we have Liberty next, okay.
We taking 10?
Yes, could we? Yes, we
Because,
have.
you know,
Yes.
as Hilda predicted.
You're serious about your code?
Yeah, well, no, I'm serious about the bathroom.
Getting rid of the code.
I know, I mean, look at the size of that code.
All right, we're taking a quick break. No, sometimes I didn't hear it, but maybe he's just gonna see what
Yeah. Yeah.
Jamie? Out there about, I think they think the contract was okay.
I'm back for more.
Yeah, it was interesting. So you're telling me that we can't send them back and say, we'll figure out your contract? I just.
We have to go by what they said.
Yeah, that's true. I just didn't know, sometimes they
That's
alter.
what I say, people, I like to go, I like it like up to the Charter School, like,
Yeah.
make sure.
No, that is true, because what was it, last month, something happened. We're like, oh yeah, well we'll change that. We're like, but that wasn't in your application, so you're submitting a new application there. Oh no, it was the no, it was the NHA school who came here who said, oh yeah, we didn't want to do fast track.
Oh,
Yeah. So they're like, oh, we'll just change our thing up. You're like, well, now you have to submit your application. So that makes sense. Yeah. Yesterday was fine. The heart of the whole is why they tried.
So how do we conduct this next one? You know, I was thinking about that.
We spent about 2 hours with it, so it's nice.
Great.
They are, I mean, yeah, so I don't know.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, that's a real problem. I mean, it's not gonna, I mean, yeah. It's, starting a charter of that size is not a part-time exercise. Right.
So, but it's like, push comes to shove, they're really going to the contract, not the outside, so they can say, this is but there.
Yeah.
At the time, I thought, but now I get it.
Kind of what sticks in my mind is this idea that Mary Catherine's just sort of throwing it up against the wall. Instead of really focusing on one high quality aspect.
Or do you just think they're just throwing it up there and saying, hey.
But in this case, they're so advanced.
Very well done. Everybody had a good time.
Yeah, video. Oh, no.
Yeah, I mean,
I didn't look specifically at this one. Is this school's director full time? Does that at least change it a little bit?
That's a good question.
At least that would give an opportunity to bring it back for some determination. Because yeah.
Students, year 2, grades K-6, expanding the 565 Year 3, K-7, 646, and then at capacity in Year 4 with grades K through 8, 727 students. Again, they will use a reduced price matrix and not participate in the National School Lunch Program. They will utilize the community bus stops, carpools, will not utilize the weighted lottery in Guilford County. The proposed zip code for their facility, again, there's not a facility that is proposed, but they are looking to build in 27265 zip code. No LEA impact statements have been submitted. They are not a repeat applicant. Again, using the ATA EMO application was complete at the time of submission. So Liberty Charter Academy is proposed for High Point, North Carolina. What you have here is a map of within the 6-mile radius. You've got greater than a dozen schools here. The closest charter school actually borders, I think, in Kernersville. Let's see, that is the North Carolina Leadership Academy. Okay, in Kernersville. So you'll see that on that Forsyth map. It looks like some of the other charter schools within close proximity, but greater than 6 miles, looks like Phoenix Academy, and then College Prep and Leadership Academy. Then you'll also see those LEA district schools here. We'll begin with the interview process, allowing the Board of Liberty Charter the 10 minutes to make their opening statement and introduce any of their new members. So, Mr. Odette.
Morning again.
Good morning.
I'm John O'Day, as you know, and I'm the chairman of the Liberty Academy Board. And on behalf of our board members and our principal, I'd like to thank the board for your time this morning. And I think we have a great team assembled, and I'd like to start by introducing the other members of the board that are present. And we have, I think we have one on the phone that we can also introduce. So I will start with John. Why you're here?
My name is Victor Jones. I serve on High Point City Council my second term. We have a big outcry from my constituents to have more educational options and overcrowding the schools and whatnot. And when Mayor Katherine reached out to what they're doing with the program, I toured the facilities, saw the first class product that they produce with their charter schools already. And I just thought, from my perspective and representing High Point, I wanted to be involved in any way that I could to help solve that problem.
Ms. Walker.
Good morning. My name is Lisa Walker. I'm a former teacher with Guilford County Schools. I have 3 children, all of whom have attended charter school, and one currently goes to traditional public school. And I am excited to be part of this board, and I currently serve on the board of Revolution Academy. And like I said, I think that High Point is an area that there's a lot of need and growth. So I'm looking forward to talking to you about that. Thank you.
You met Matthew Snyder. Matt, did you want to say anything about this particular board?
Yes. I won't repeat all of what I said earlier. Matthew Schneider from High Point University. The reason I wanted to be on this board was it's in High Point, and I've been teaching at High Point University for 13 years. And High Point University enjoys a relationship with the surrounding community that I think a lot of college towns would like to have. There's a tremendous spirit of cooperation between the city of High Point and the university, and I see this. I see Liberty Charter Academy as another way to bring that wonderful relationship to benefit the citizens of the city of High Point. So that's the main reason why I was interested in being on this board, in addition to the other things that I talked about earlier, which include just the fostering the appreciation and love of a classical curriculum and broad foundation of knowledge for our students. And I think we can do that with this Liberty Charter Academy in the city where I work. So I'm excited to do that.
And is John Brewer on? No. John Brewer is our vice chair, and he is He's also a member of the board at Revolution Academy. I talked a little bit about my daughter in our earlier session, but I want to talk a little bit about my father, and as one of the reasons why I value education the way that I do today. My father never finished high school. He decided to leave home early and go into the Air Force. He was a career military officer. We traveled all over the country, and I had an education in American geography. I lived everywhere from Maryland to Mississippi to Alaska to Arizona. Some of those moves, by the weird direction, moving from Mississippi to Alaska in the winter, moving from Alaska to Arizona in the summer. But what my dad made sure that I did and understood was the value of education, even though he hadn't formally completed his, but he did later in life. Again, further driving the point home that education was the most important thing in my life. And the thing I needed to take full advantage of the opportunities that were offered to me. I grew up in the public school system. There were some good things about public schools back when I went to school, and there were some bad things about public schools that still exist today. But I never forgot the lessons of education that my father taught me, and he also was a servant. He believed in serving people. He belonged to a number of volunteer organizations, and so he established that bit of servitude in me. Both as a public servant, I serve on the board. I serve on the town council of the town of Summerfield, and I've been a volunteer in several other organizations. Several years ago, now I began looking for opportunities to help kids with education. I said, "There's a real need out there, and I believe in it. Where can I go?" And eventually, my path led me to marry Katherine Sauer. And that was a few years ago, where I became a member of the Revolution Bunker Hill Board that applied here 2 years ago. And we were not approved in that area, and we intended to come back. However, there was a school that was approved in the area we were trying to open, so we started looking at where are the other opportunities in Guilford County. And we looked at Southwest Guilford being a major area that's underserved by the LEAs. They are not performing well. By my standards. I don't know that they're performing well by anybody's standards. And I believe the kids in that area are underserved, and I think that as an individual who lives in Guilford County, I have a responsibility to help kids get a great education that my daughter's received over her 7-year charter school career. We are partnering with ATA. We'll just get that elephant right out of the room right now. Why? They have prior success. They've opened on one side, the capital side. They have opened American Charter Development has opened over 100 schools, about 115 schools. Some cases they're opening 15, 16 schools a year, so they have capacity to open schools. Prior success in the local area, Mary Katherine Sauer is a member of ATA, Piedmont Classical, Cornerstone, and then just past year Revolution Academy. She's opened all three. She's a winner. She associates with winners. I believe in her team. I believe in Dennis Gleason. I believe in Randy Shaver, who's also part of the ATA team. They are high quality people, and that's the people that Mary Katherine surrounds herself with, and why I approached her to serve on another board after the Revolution Academy board. We also will have some ability to synergize between multiple schools. We'll say maybe it's two, but we would have some ability to synergize between those schools, even at the principal level, where the principals could consult and are mentored by Randy Shaver. So we want to take care of, and we want to certainly take full advantage of that ability. And we would be able to flex some staffing if we had some emergencies across schools. There's certainly a better benefit cost structure for employees. They're employees of ATA versus individual employees of a smaller school. And then we have recruitment opportunities that can stretch nationwide. Marketing, David Gleason will be helping with our community outreach and marketing. And a willingness to be flexible in funding and logistic models. So we're not locked into one particular model. We haven't worked everything out. You know that from the previous applicant. But we certainly intend to work together to benefit the kids in the area. I am also blessed to know personally the principal for Liberty Academy, Michelle Barsley. I've known Michelle several years. She's a passionate educator, and I believe she is going to be a guiding light for kids that would attend Liberty Charter, and I am certainly happy to have her on our team. And Michelle, if you'd like to introduce yourself, please.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you, members of the board, and your dedication to education. My journey of education started in 2007 when I took a position at Grimsley High School in Greensboro as a CTE teacher. And my background in business for 13 years in finance and IT was a great step for me to start investing in the lives of our children. And my journey to education started with my own children being in school, my 4, and having a career in corporate America, and then staying home for about 7 years after that. I decided to become a teacher, and that door opened for me at Grimsley, and I'm so thankful. It's been an amazing experience. Through my 14 years, I've become a teacher leader in the CTE area, teaching teachers effective instructional strategies. I've written courses for DPI at CTE. I've also taught for NCVPS and helped write courses for NCVPS. My journey as a charter school advocate began also when my own children. We switched out of public school into a charter school at Greensboro Academy. That's been mentioned a few times today, an NHA school. So my children attended Greensboro Academy. I can tell you they've all been wonderfully successful in their education and the opportunities they've been afforded. They're all now adults, which is awesome. And so I am very excited about this opportunity today with you all moving forward in this next journey. I currently serve as an instructional coach at the Revolution Academy, and I'm very excited that now being immersed in the day-to-day K-8 curriculum and the core knowledge curriculum, I'm one more step, I believe, in the right direction to lead Liberty Charter Academy. And liberty and justice for all is what is written on our logo in Latin. And I felt that was important because I believe that education is the key for all children. For all children to succeed, they have to have a strong foundation in education. They have to have excellent teachers, and we hope that they will have parent involvement in that process. But we know that that is not the case in all situations. So I'm here as a parent, as a teacher, and as a leader in the state of North Carolina to start Liberty Charter Academy in the High Point area. And I really appreciate your time today and look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Our mission at Liberty Charter Academy will develop responsible and service-minded students who are prepared for secondary education through a foundation of rigorous academics, individual responsibility, character education, and parental partnerships. I've seen my daughter 7 years become the person she is today because of her education through a charter school system. So we're certainly passionate about what we do, and with that, I welcome your questions. Should we talk about the contract?
We will.
All right.
So I got a little levity there.
Thank you for coming back.
So this is a serious thing. So
Yes.
seriously,
We understand.
we're at your service.
Remind me, we have 25 minutes or 45 minutes for
25.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Round 1, round 2, all runs together. So we have 25 minutes for questions and answers for the board. So who would like to, this first, like we did with the last time, let's kind of get the questions that are top of mind out on the table, and then we'll give the board a chance to respond.
Well, since the contract doesn't change, I won't ask contract questions. But we didn't get to some of the budget questions, which are very similar in all of the apps, and so that might be an opportunity for us to look at some of the budget concerns that people have.
I think we still have to address the board service. On this board, we have 4 of the 5 who are going to be starting 2 or 3 schools that are serving on 2 different boards, and 3 of those, correct me, maybe 2 of those are on a current board. So it's greater duplication than ever, again, with a new charter management company who's also attempting to open, well, maybe 2 I know the comment was kind of dismissed with the first school, and I understand that. I defend what I do as well, and I have involvement, but you get to the place where quality suffers. You lose inefficiency, and you can only stretch yourself so thin. And to have 4 of the 5 board members serving on 2 different boards, and some of them on 3, to start at the new school, I don't know that there needs to be a discussion, just that exists, that exists with this board.
Other items you want to address? I'll say I'll ask some specific budget questions this time around as well. I'm interested to know with Miss, I'm sorry, is it Barsley? Is that correct?
Bardsley.
What her status would be in terms of when she might come on full time. You know, would she possibly be full time during the Ready to Open year? One of the things I'd like to get maybe fleshed out a little bit more too is how will you be different? And I know the way that question was answered in the previous interview, and I'm not saying it was answered wrong, but beyond core knowledge, beyond a classical curriculum, what's going to be different about this school versus the other schools that students might have access to that you would be drawing from? This school is in High Point. Is there a proposed relationship or any way with the university, since one of your board members has is a part of that? So just honing in a little bit more on what is going to be different beyond just the core knowledge approach.
Related to that important point, and it wasn't addressed in the last school, what's the need? Tell me what the need is and how this school addresses that need. Could be student performance, could be other needs related to the district. So what need are we filling here? Describe it and describe how this school fills that need.
Is that a good place to start? Okay, why don't we start with the, well, let's start with that one. Then we'll go to some of the other questions about budget and head of school.
And how it's different.
But let's talk to us about the need,
Okay.
And then tie that into how your proposed school is different.
Yeah, I always, what really stood out to me when we were developing the application was the performance of the schools in the surrounding area, and how, frankly, I'm just going to state it from my perspective, how poorly they're performing. D, C, D, D, C, D, D, C. One exceeded an A. On the elementary side, there was one B, and then on the middle school side, C, F, C, C, D. Those schools, in my mind, aren't performing at a level that's acceptable to me. If I was a parent in that area, I'd be looking for options. And we know Mr. Jones could probably speak a little bit more about this because he's a council member in High Point. Those parents are begging for an option that will give their kids a better education. And that's why I'm doing this. That's why we're here. But I can let Vic, if you want to speak to that a little bit, and then maybe Michelle a little bit more about how we're going to be different.
As John mentioned, the school's underperforming in the quality of education is obviously a concern that a lot of our citizens have expressed to our school board, expressed to us as the council. But another issue is just capacity. It's a massively growing area in the city of High Point. I mean, we've got rezoning too many rezoning cases. It keeps me up at night having to deal with all of them. But just that particular area where I've discussed, I think I've discussed with Mary Katherine and Michelle about a couple properties that I think are in need for certain areas of the northern High Point. 300 houses going in here, another 80 houses going in, all within about 2 square miles in that city of High Point. So, I mean, your point is exactly right that the underperformance is one issue, but capacity is a huge issue for us right now.
I will address briefly some data, and I hope that all of you have found this page in your application that highlights data from our current Guilford County school system. And the question on this charter application prompted me to dig deeper and create this chart. Being a financial analyst in my prior career, this was not a difficult task for me to put together, but it was a very eye-opening experience. And these averages that you might see, read to achieve, third grade level 26.9%, grade level proficiency in math 3 to 5, 48%. And this is grades, this is 3 to 5. Grade level proficiency in ELA 46%. And then think about that. That is who is proficient. So the other 54% of students are not proficient in ELA reading. That is saddens me as an educator. And this to me just cannot continue. And so the core knowledge curriculum, we talked about that a lot, and I believe most of you are probably convinced that core knowledge is a great program. It is. It does focus on language. It focuses on reading and reading comprehension. And being a high school teacher for 14 years, when I saw students coming in who could not read well, that is a showstopper right there. And so reading is essential, and I believe in this core knowledge program and have seen it in action, that we need to really focus on that in our schools K-8. Also, what stands out? You asked about what stands out. So besides core knowledge, we have a very focused character education program where we have a character trait every month, and we focus on that in the classroom. Teachers on a daily basis will teach a character lesson. We have that in our schedule every day. We also have cursive handwriting in our schedule every day for grades 3 to 8. We're using Shirley Grammar as our English language art or English program with a intense writing program. That's another thing that stands out about our school. On a daily basis, we have an assembly right early in the morning where we gather as a school and say the pledge. We say our school creed and the preamble. And those are wonderful daily habits we have as a school. We also have a standard mode of dress, which I think is a great equalizer for students, and also parents usually love it because they don't have to fight with their children about what they're wearing to school. I've experienced that myself. Those are some of the things that we have that stands out. The core knowledge sequence is incredible. It goes into history and geography and science. So all those parts of our program are just incredible. Also, another thing that stands out is our parental partnerships. We encourage, we need, and we expect our parents to be involved in whatever way they can, whether they work part-time, work full-time, or even grandparents can get involved. We have a lot of grandparents who get involved in our school. So those are some of the ways that our school stands out. Any more questions about that? Yes.
So there's no weighted lottery for the school, correct? Is that right?
That's correct.
So just to throw this out there, I was a principal at Grimsley about the same time you started there, and I was regional superintendent for the enrichment region for Guilford County Schools, which served several schools in High Point. Lots of poverty, lots of hard working conditions and learning conditions. So I'm curious as to why a weighted lottery wasn't considered.
So we believe that in our marketing efforts, and we know the diverse community that High Point is, we have that data also, and with the recent census, we've looked at that too. We believe that with our marketing efforts and our relationship building between our board, as well as I as a principal, as well as our focused marketing efforts that are going to be taken care of also with Dennis, right there. And he's going to help us build relationships, as well as the relationships we already have with Victor Jones being on the city council. He is very much into relationship building throughout his community, and we're going to come along as a team, and we're going to be reaching out to diverse communities throughout High Point, and it will be very intentional. And so we didn't feel the need for that weighted lottery because of those leadership, marketing, and relationship building efforts that we will have in place. And we already have many in place today. Thank you for that question, Mr. Eldridge.
In your application, you mentioned that you did a survey and you got about 200 responses. What other, if any, marketing have you already done? Because I think you're correct. I mean, when you answer the question of need, we all sometimes go to, well, the other schools around our area are not performing, which in your case is true,
That doesn't mean parents are leaving, though. So what other strategies have you employed or plan to employ to kind of really make sure because you want to have 376 kids year one, which means you probably got to have about 600 applications.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part of
I
that.
said you're trying to have 376 students year one, which probably means you're going to be you're probably going to need to have 550 to 600 applications. So talk a little bit about that marketing effort.
It's marketing through community outreach. I think I think Dennis brings us an advantage that a lot of schools don't have in the beginning, because he knows how to do outreach to communities and where to go. One would be certainly rec programs, churches, getting in with the church community is going to be really helpful. Because the pastors in those churches help drive kids and parents to better opportunities. They certainly want better opportunities for the parishioners. And then other general social media marketing. I mean, we're gonna it's gonna be a full gambit of marketing. We also have transportation, reduced lunches, and it's not that we wouldn't do a weighted lottery. It's just that we haven't seen in past weighted lotteries where we're getting the kids that we really want, right? So it doesn't always seem to effectively hit that community. So we want to go right at the community, and we'll just leave the lottery as is. That's our current planning.
You're planning to do community bus stops,
right?
So am I correct? That would be, you're not doing obviously door to door, but you might have a pickup at the Walmart parking lot, or
Correct.
You might have it. How's that? Just in your budget, you have no line item for buses.
I thought we had transportation in our budget. Yeah, it's in our budget. It's fairly flatlined because of course
it's definitely flatlined. There's no figure there.
Go ahead.
Okay, so we contract with First Student, who's a very reliable resource in High Point. The busing, remember, well, I don't know if you know, buses are charged by the bus. So whether they're full or not full, they're charged by the bus. So that's why it's looking flat, you could say, because the buses most likely are not necessarily full when we start school.
Where is that? Where in the budget is transportation services being pulled from? Is it there?
Under professional contract.
Professional contract.
Transportation.
Transportation under professional contract. It's under the operations budget in the third section down. And it starts at 90,000 year one and then goes 135,000 for the following years.
Okay, I see it there, line 25. Thank you for that.
Yes, sir.
Yep. I was looking
Also,
down the transportation section.
And so the survey we did, and there was a question, a comment on the application by Gail Marr. She asked about the count of the responses. So the survey had 217 responses. 194 of those responses, the parents, that's 89%, said yes, they would attend our school if it was to open in the fall of 2023. They had school-age children, and they were very interested in enrolling their children.
When will you be ready to start full-time?
I will be able to start as soon as this is approved. Full-time.
So
The planning year. I will be full-time. The planning year, I will leave my current position.
Other questions?
Mr. Goldby, did we answer, or, I'm sorry, is it?
Terry.
Mr. Stoops, I'm sorry, I
Yes.
can't tell. Did we answer your questions?
Thank you. Answer all the financial questions that you didn't get to answer last time.
Yeah, I mean, I have a follow-up on the same question I asked the last time, but we didn't really dive into the budget. Well, it wasn't a question, it was a comment, which was, again, new staff, new students, implementing core knowledge.
Do we have enough in the budget to
Yeah,
train
you've got
teachers?
34 teachers and, was it 34? Yeah, or 24 teachers and $12,000 in professional development.
With our relationships with the Core Knowledge as well as Saxon, they provide training for our teachers. And so they come in before school starts. We have 2 weeks of intense training in our schedule where we have training directly with the resources of Core Knowledge and Saxon and Shirley Grammar. So that's a huge part of our training that happens. And so that's not in the budget. It's part of the program that they offer training to us.
And they've agreed to provide that at no cost?
Because if you look at, obviously they don't do it for free, so.
So we are also working with Revolution Academy, and so teachers helping teachers is a huge part of our PD. Our teachers who are experts in Core Knowledge, we transfer knowledge to each other through our PD training throughout the year, through our PLCs that we have throughout the year. And of course, all teachers are not trained in Core Knowledge. So when a new teacher comes on board, there's going to be some training involved with that. And so we feel confident that between the training with Core Knowledge and the Saxon and the Shirley Grammar, our teachers are receiving the training that they need on a weekly and monthly basis, and through the PLC community also.
So people from Revolution are coming they're gonna come to High Point, and how's that work?
So once should we receive a win on this and start the school, we will have shared training with shared knowledge between the schools. So yes. And should other schools be added on, and this is part of the synergy of if we had multiple schools approved, we will be able to better use each other's resources and help each other in that process.
Is Revolution also now being run by ATA?
No. No, it is not.
Thank you for your answers to that. It's not just related to Core Knowledge, just 12,000 is not a lot in professional development, particularly when you're getting off the ground in your first year. There's going to be a lot of team building activities, I'm assuming, you'll have with new staff, and it can be eaten up quickly. So I just throw that out there as if you do get a vote for moving forward. That
well
might be an
noted.
item to look
Because
at.
in year one, I mean, I was gonna ask a question, not to interrupt, but year one, you have $176,000 surplus based on what you have for your budget. So I imagine there's somewhere in there where there's room to consider
Yes.
staff development, right?
Yes.
And then maybe I missed this, and it might have been in the presentation in the first one, and I'm sorry I walked in late. So it's $300,000 in year one for facility lease. Are you like renting somewhere and then moving into a facility? Is that what's going on? And there's no maintenance to come along with that because it's renting from something.
That's right.
We have a dedicated facility that's already been, it's already certified to have a school in it that's ready for us whenever we're ready.
Sorry I missed that.
Is that where they're staying, or is that a temporary facility, or is that where you intend to
That's
stay?
a temporary facility.
Temporary
Yeah,
facility.
They housed, sorry, no, up to the mic, right? They housed, they actually, that's where Revolution Academy opened, when they first opened. So that temporary facility is amenable to us, also being here temporarily.
Is that in High Point?
It is in High Point.
In the narrative, I may have missed this as well. Do you guys have a predicted amount of free and reduced lunch students that you're going to serve?
I want to say it was up to 40%. Yeah.
40%?
Yes, sir. And if it's higher than that, we'll make adjustments.
And what kind of supports have you put in place to support that larger number of low-income children?
I'm saying, I didn't hear your whole question.
What kind of support systems are built into your school for support for 40% low income?
Oh, okay, besides the lunches?
Yeah, besides lunch, yeah.
I'll let Ms. Parsley answer that in a little bit more depth. Certainly the transportation, after-school care at reduced cost.
So we will use the multiple tiered systems of support process. We will use the SST process for students who may be struggling. We will have a certified EC department. We also will have full-time tutor on staff that will be there to help students with small group pullouts as well as individual instruction. All of our teachers are asked to offer tutoring once a week also to their students that they're teaching, and they arrange that time with parents. And is there any other questions about that? We will have the supports in place, absolutely, for all children to succeed.
What about social emotional support?
So social emotional support, we talk about this in our staff meetings. We train teachers on those very important building relationships with students, understanding where they are. Building that relationship with parents is also very important to helping our students wherever their needs might be. We do have a budget where we can also hire and contract with specialists as needed.
You also plan on, I imagine, applying for Title I funding? You guys thinking of that, or?
That will depend on the number of students that actually qualify. We do have a process where when they are enrolled, they will fill out the free and reduced lunch form as well as the ELL language surveys.
So it depends really on the enrollment.
Where's the financing? So I'm pleased to hear that if approved, you would be starting full-time during the ready to open year.
June of 2022.
Two.
Yes.
Where's the funding for that position coming from?
150. Yeah, the startup funds.
The 150,000
Yes, sir.
that ATA is giving.
Ms. Barnes, we have a question about the budget. In year one, there's 80,000 allotted for testing supplies, but in all the subsequent years, it's a 5,000. I just wondered what that front-end purchase is that is not necessary in the remaining years.
The laptops we use to test students on.
So that's not in the computer budget where you're purchasing? Seems like you had about 80,000 for computers.
So we have computers needed for staff. We provide computers for our staff, as well as we have sets of computers we use for testing.
Right.
So that's the differentiation between the two.
You do have 80,000 for computers for students every year.
Let's see which line item you're looking at.
Treasurer can answer that question, I think, a little bit.
Okay, could you restate your question to make sure I
There's an
understand, my understanding?
$80,000
Yes,
for one
correct,
cost.
in years 1 through 5.
And line item for testing supplies, in subsequent years, it's $5,000. I wondered what you're buying on the front end in year one, because there is a computer budget.
Okay, say that again, I'm sorry. You said the testing supplies. Okay. So year one, you have 80,000.
Right.
Okay. And then year
What are you
two,
purchasing in year one that is not needed in all the subsequent years? It's $80,000.
what I would say is that in conjunction with, you've got 80,000 for computers for students, and you've got 80,000 from my personal experience. I would also that we are purchasing additional computers for example, with Revolution Academy. We had to, we opened and then there was a pandemic. So then we had to figure out where in our budget that we could have funds to support that. And so on the flip side of that is we didn't know what we didn't know, and now we know what we didn't know. And so our goal is to buy those materials to make sure that we are well prepared for.
At least have budgeted.
Yes, correct. Because and as John mentioned, there is flexibility in this budget. As with a charter school, you're not going to be able to anticipate every single line item to the dime. Particularly your startup year. So you've got to have flexibility, and you've got to have built-in categories that have some overages, because you can't anticipate every single thing. For example, if we had to purchase some additional textbooks, if we had to purchase books, something like that, we would have to, if it didn't fall within the category, we would have to go back and adjust it and make sure, because the goal is to make sure that the students are educated. and that we're doing everything we can as a board and as a school to provide the materials necessary.
So that brings me back to the contract.
Yes.
Because just given what you just said, so if you end up not needing that $80,000 to buy computers because you'd already spent $80,000 to buy computers, that becomes profit to the management company.
Well, let me answer this, because when I was sitting back there, I as a parent and having been before this board multiple other times for other charter schools, I understand where you're coming from, and I understand your hesitancy. What I would say to that is that the management company prepares the budget. The board approves the budget. We are the governing board. We make decisions based on the needs and the needs of the school and the best interests of the school. So therefore, we have to be able to adjust those items, and we have to be able to, if for example, because I agree with you, it then becomes profit. Not necessarily, because it can go from that category over to another category, because we as a board are responsible for everything that goes on in terms of a governing and providing that school, making sure that that school and those students and those families have what's necessary for their education. And it's certainly not meant to provide revenue, additional revenue that was not necessarily, expected on, because again, it has to be a partnership.
Okay, so I get that.
Right.
That's how that works. And
Yeah.
However, this particular contract is set up in such a way. So at Revolution, where you don't have a management company, that you move stuff around in the budget, you do.
Yes.
True.
But
in this particular contract, it says that I lost my exact wording on this thing, but it says ATA reserves to itself the right to designate the means and methods of accomplishing objectives and purposes of the agreement. And then any money that's left over goes to ATA. And if you don't agree with them, they can leave. So I'm not seeing a whole bunch of where you get to be in charge there.
Okay. I mean, I'll come back to that if you don't mind.
Sure. So it is a partnership, and frankly, we're united in what we're trying to do, and we do. And while you mentioned the board, the management company can terminate the contract for cause for a breach that's not remedied. Either one of us can terminate the contract with 90 days notice for no reason at all. So I mean, there's openings either way. If we're not satisfied, if they're not satisfied, and it gets to that point, We're going to have to negotiate what happens after that, and we are going to manage the management company. That's our job. We are going to monitor their progress toward our goals on a monthly basis. We are going to monitor the financials. We do approve the budget, so we do have the authority to alter that budget. Certainly, it's a partnership. We would sit down and try to come to some sort of agreement where we want to move that $80,000 if it's not used. Hey, guess what? We need more in the educating teachers fund, or we need more money for reduced lunches. That's what we would do. We would make those adjustments. To say that we don't have that authority, I think, is incorrect. We do have that authority, and we will exercise it.
I guess I hear what you're saying, and that's how it's supposed to work. I agree, that's how it's supposed to work. My concern is that if it comes down to it, it goes to what's in the contract. That's what you'll be held to. What's in that contract.
Sure, and if we have a school at a deficit that's forced that they decide they're going to get out of that contract because that school is running at a deficit, they're going to eat the money. We're
not according to this contract.
We're a nonprofit. What are we going to have?
If you continue as a school, you will have future income.
Sure, then we would have to pay it back. But if the school fails, no one wins. It's all incumbent on us working together to make sure this school, and I know these people, and I've worked with these people, and I know Mary Katherine, and we are going to be united in making a school successful. And that's our goal. No one's going to win if the school fails. We are all in this together, and we know that as a partnership. And it is a partnership. That's what it is, and that's how we intend to operate as partners, in good faith. That's just what this is. Yeah.
Mr. O'Day, did your board approve this budget that we're looking at that was submitted with the application?
Yes, ma'am.
Your board reviewed it and approved it?
The board reviewed and approved it. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. You have an error, again, as you know, the budgets are pretty much a duplicate.
Where's the error?
You have a phone line item for $25,000.
That's not an error, ma'am. That's correct.
So you're gonna have $25,000.
$2,500. It's the phone expenses for year one is $2,500. That's correct.
Yes, sir, the first year, but what about years 2, 3, 4, and 5?
I think they were 25,000 when I remember seeing.
So what is that? What is that purchasing?
I'm sorry?
$25,000 for the phone.
Let me get the specific.
Okay.
Are the $80,000, there's $80,000 in classroom technology, line 65 for student computers. Are those Chromebooks?
Let me point out while you're looking at that there's a
We're
communication.
going to lease the phone system. That's what that is now.
There's a communication and telephone line item that is kind of all over the place. In year one, it's $8,000. In year two, it's $36,000, and then $25,000. A hugely fluctuating funding amount. But then this is a separate line item that just says phone.
Do you mind telling me what page you're on? I've got sticky notes everywhere.
Well, in your budget.
We don't get it.
Yeah, well, are you looking at the operations budget?
Yes.
Okay. So go down, say that again.
So line 10 has communications and telephone, which is not a consistent figure. I don't know what that's funding other than your phone lines and maybe your internet.
Maybe I'm looking at the different one because I don't see lines.
Then if you go down to line 41. under
See, I don't have
utilities,
numbers.
You have a phone budget under utilities of $25,000 in years 2 through 5. It just seemed exorbitant to me. I didn't know what you might be doing those 4 years.
Well, what I will say to that is, maybe this is the right one. Oh, that's what, right. Yeah, what I will say is with the leasing of a phone system and/or, again, we have to have a cushion in some categories to go back and be able to readjust.
I want to ask very specific, how much time do we have left?
You are overtime,
But you
it's
can-
currently at 34 minutes.
If I can answer it, I'll be glad to.
What?
I mean, I hope I can.
Okay, in the instructional technology budget, you've got $80,000 for student computers. So my question simply is that Chromebooks?
Yeah, in the instructional,
Is it Chromebooks?
I think it's a combination. Personally, I would say it's a combination.
It's not
of
personally what you feel it is, what is it?
Chromebooks.
The computers we are purchasing are Chromebooks.
Thank you.
Yes.
So then there's another $80,000 in testing supplies. Am I to understand that that is additional hardware?
So aren't the Chromebooks a projection as an alternative to in-person education if necessary? Isn't that what?
No, we have to have the Chromebooks for state testing.
Well, no, for state testing. Not for students. So there's one for testing, and then there's a budgetary line item for students. So I think that's what we're doing.
Instructional materials and curriculum. Go ahead.
It's also for the NWEA MAP testing fees that we pay for testing students.
Yeah, and that goes back to Ms. Hare's question, which I don't think I've got the comfort level in the answer, which was in testing supplies, you have $80,000 that first year, and it drops by $75,000 every subsequent year.
Mm-hmm.
That's the disconnect that I'm not understanding in the budget, that's all. And it was said that it was for hardware. So you don't buy every student a Chromebook for $80,000 earlier in the budget and then buy them additional hardware just to take the test.
So you're correct, and we have several categories. We have hardware for the staff, computers for the staff.
Separate budget item, yep.
Right, we have Chromebooks for the students,
Yep.
for the testing. We also pay for the NWEA testing that we do 3 times a year for all the students.
Agreed.
So why aren't you gonna do
So
it for
why
year
is
two?
it $75,000 less than every subsequent year? Yeah.
Does NWA go down to $5,000 in year 2? Do you not pay as much for it in year 2?
And you had 189 students that year.
Yeah, we are adding students. So I'm not sure about the categories and where they literally are landing without digging deeper into the spreadsheet, and I don't have access to
Fair
that
enough.
at this time.
Yeah, we're well over time, so thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Didn't have a closing statement. Yeah. So we ask the board at this time to provide a closing statement.
So again, I'd like to thank the board for your time. We're in the afternoon, barely crossed noon this afternoon and this morning. And on behalf of the Liberty Academy, the Liberty Charter Academy Board and Principal Bardsley. And as you see, we have an engaged team that work diligently with our ATA partners to open Liberty Charter and begin the process of producing highly educated students and really exceptional people, individuals that Southwestern Guilford County, High Point, Jamestown area can be proud of that we're producing. A couple of things I'll say. One, ATA is not just 3 people. I think we've mentioned about 6 or 7 plus the principal. So I think we're up to 9 or 10 folks at ATA. And as a member of the Centerpoint board as well, I now only have one board to focus on. So does Mr. Steiner. So we've created a little bit more capacity. Maybe that was an accident, but we do have a little bit more capacity. And I plan to recruit Mr. Craven to the Liberty Charter Board, as that apparently he has a little more free time. Is he still here? He left. He was a member of the other board, so we'll plan to certainly expand by at least that one. If board capacity was an issue. Again, as a partner with ATA, it is incumbent upon us to work together, and we get nothing out of not working together. We are highly focused on our mission, which is educating kids, giving kids opportunities that they may not have had before the opening of our school. I'm an elected official, so I'm going to ask for your vote today to approve our application. Again, we believe we have a solid plan. We may need to make a few tweaks, but we believe we have a solid plan, and we certainly have the team that will open a school successfully and do it in the time frame that we provided for. And again, thank you for your time and your consideration today. Thanks.
Thank you, and thank you all for your answers and your responses today. So we have now time to deliberate amongst ourselves. I guess I'll start by saying, I'm speaking for myself, but I think I speak on behalf of CSEB, and because you mentioned it a few times in this presentation. I don't think anyone's questioning the caliber and the quality of the people who are associated with your project in any way, shape, or form. It's tough to be on the firing line. Many of us have been on that end of the podium. It's not a question of whether or not we feel that the individuals involved are have stellar reputations and incapable of pulling this off. I think the questions you're hearing are about budget and contract and those types of things. I just wanted to throw that out there. This is not a vote on the people involved. So, with that,
So like I said, I'm very familiar with this area, or at least I'm semi-familiar with it, and I would say High Point needs alternative, they need schools for people to choose from, definitely. I know that for a fact. I also know that in working in Guilford County Schools, there's a strong perception that charter schools sometimes are places for high elite students to go to school. And that's why my question about a weighted lottery is something I really think that the school should consider for a couple of reasons. One, to really make sure that it's targeting those kids that need the most assistance. And then two, when you start looking at trying to get Title I funding to support kids with high needs, it's really hard, at least it is for our school, to get people to turn in those free and reduced lunch forms, especially if you're not going to be in the National School Lunch Program. There's no benefit for them to fill the form out, and so lots of times you don't get an accurate picture of the number of students that are going to attend with free and reduced lunch needs. So just thinking about that out loud. I know Rain to Shave. It was my pleasure to work with Rain to Shaver, so I know you guys have high quality people on the team. I think that there's staff development needs. I can tell you with working with those schools out there, there's a high level of staff development needs, and the two things that happen in schools in that area is high administrator and high teacher turnover. And so when you start looking at the type of training that needs to be in place to work with students with high needs, $12,000 probably doesn't scratch the surface of what you're going to need with ongoing PD too. So, just something to keep in mind, because I know if you look at the teacher turnover trends in that area, that working with the same students with the same types of staff doing the same types of things may not get the fruit that you want. So, just consider that with the way the lottery and the National School Lunch Program and things like that. But I do believe the school system in that area definitely needs alternatives.
I was impressed once again, with the potential head of school. Pleased to know in this application that she would be starting as part of that ready to open process from day one, if granted that opportunity. I think, I'm assessing this board and this application separately from the others, but that to me is important, as well as, I think it's just important when you have board members who are spread across multiple boards in that ready to open year. It's a major lift. I have a lot of questions still about the budget, I'm not gonna lie. I felt we were getting, I thought things were sinking, and I think we started asking budget questions, and I don't think I didn't get clear answers in that budget.
Obviously, the concerns I had about the contract didn't change, same contract. But when we got into the budget this time, which we hadn't the last time, I came away feeling like maybe there's budget issues, and while the board approved the budget, I'm not so sure how much they were involved in designing the budget. And that goes to the contract issues. So I do have concerns. Again, I don't have concerns about the people. I do think that all these people are capable of doing this. I do think that being in multiple places is difficult, but as to your point, we've lost a place for you to go, so that eliminates one multiple. But I do still have, I have real concerns about this contract, and because of those, then the things that border on that make me nervous.
I share those concerns, and I also, we haven't even touched on it, but going into the contract again with staffing, hiring, training, all of that falls under ATA, and that's concerning to me as the leader of a school, to know that your hands are tied with those concerns with this contract. And the budget, I don't feel like we got near the confidence in the answers that brought me any confidence in the budget.
I think we're all in agreement that it might not be able to pass this time, but maybe a second round if need be. I don't think any of us are comfortable moving it forward, but with the contract, I do have a question about that, and I don't know if the lawyers can weigh in or somebody from CSAB, because I was listening in earlier. I came here late as well, but they did say that if the contract is a problem, and they were supposed to isolate both applications, but the last application they said if the contract's a problem, they'd come back and revisit that. And I just wanted to know from the lawyers or CSAB, is that something that is on the table? And if not, why? I know we had offline conversations, but I just wanted to know because I do share your concerns. The contract, I mean, the words in a contract mean something, and if I am on the other side of it and I have the opportunity to exercise a contract to benefit me, then I will do that, and that's what my concern is with all of you as well. So I just wanted to put that, I just want to get it on the record again with this.
We don't allow material changes to the application
in
the process?
Do we, is it not, they offered it, so I just didn't know, and I don't want to start a precedent, but I just asking, is it
this
not?
Is such a huge, changing the contract's a huge material change, and I think that sets a precedent. I mean, we haven't allowed material changes to the budgets.
Okay.
So to now say you can go back and change the contract would, in the future, open us up to you can just change it as much as you want.
Yeah, so that is off the table.
Right,
Okay.
that is the problem, and that's what I had sort of explored with the first school. You'd like to solve that problem, you'd like to do it now rather than later, but the contract is embedded in the application and cannot be disturbed. And it does appear that there's just a high level, not necessarily a negative thing, but a high level of trust between each of these boards and the management company, the charter management company, and the owner or founder, Mary Katherine Sauer. So I think that level of trust kind of prevented them from really independently analyzing the details, and maybe not, maybe they have, but to look at it in a totally removed way as two independent parties in a legal contract. Instead, there's this trust that comes in that we'll work that out, that these things can be decided later. When we know that, you know, the legal issues, they'll go back to the wording of the contract. There's been some mention of American charter development, and yet I think we don't know anything or very little about what that entity is and how it's involved. If there's any level of support that comes from that, if it had anything to do with the writing of the contract or the budget or any other area of this. So that's something that might be explored in the future.
I think
if this
the principal of that company is also a principal here. American Charter Development has helped several schools with buildings in North Carolina, so we have seen them be involved with schools here in North Carolina, never as management company, always as support for facility.
So are these two schools allowed to go back with this feedback in line with what the discussion was and reapply?
Oh, they can reapply in the next round in January, yes.
I have a question, maybe piggybacking on Jamie's question, and this, I realize I'm splitting hairs here, but and we haven't really ever allowed material changes to a contract. This is probably a material change, but is taking something out of the contract more appeasing than adding to it? Because the issues I have with the contract primarily are the things that I wish were taken out. Not
what's said in it.
Like strike this, strike this.
Well, they expressed a willingness to strike the problematic provision from that contract. I'm okay with it, but
I don't want to set any precedent either, but there was a willingness there, and like you said, it's not, we are splitting hairs at that point.
Yeah, we're not asking them to like restructure the contract where
yeah.
ATA now is a fee for services and they take 3% of the budget, and I think that's a significant change.
Because if there's not a change in what they said earlier, like, well, we're on the hook. Well, really, the students and the parents and the taxpayers are really on the hook if something goes wrong, and that's where I'm looking at, and so is the charter community. I don't want this to set a precedent of how a CSAB allows for contracts to be done. And
I've been here a long time, doing this a very long time, and our experience has been that once we move from what we say we're going to do, it becomes a problem in the future.
Fair.
And we have been very consistent over the last at least 8 years I've been here that we don't allow material changes to the application once the application has been submitted. Now, we have allowed name changes.
We've had budget changes.
We've allowed some budget changes, but we've even backed some off of that because then in the last round, we had people who sent us a whole new budget the morning of the interview. And it was totally different than the budget we were working with. So we've even backed some off of that. I would not be in favor of agreeing to changing the contract. If it's only strike, I guess that's not as big a deal, but I have some concerns with the contract that are more than just the striking that one clause.
That's what my question was. This school set to open in 2022 or 2023?
23.
So if given the opportunity to go back and sit down with this company to rewrite and submit differently and correct some of the errors or maybe some of the mistypes or whatever that are found in the budget, that to me would...
They could come back and apply as accelerated, and it would still give
Well,
them...
and particularly this school as opposed to the last one, because
Because
this
they
one
have
has a
facility.
facility. This one has a facility.
Because they need a full-time
And so
person.
they actually could come back accelerated in the next round and still open in 23. Or
As long as they can provide a compelling reason for that school along with the facility.
Yeah. But they actually have, provided
Yeah,
need.
they've got compelling reasons, I know that.
Their need is pretty strong.
Yep.
And they have facilities, so they actually could come back, apply in January and still open at the same time, especially since the school leader's gonna start anyway. They could actually do that.
And again, not to press anything, my own beliefs on if they choose to do that, then is to really re-explore what they stand for, so that it's obvious how it stands out different than the schools that are in High Point, and to really think hard about how they're going to get the information they need to get the most financial support they can to support their students through Title I funding or whatever funding that can come in, because I know that those numbers are not going to be a problem in the area in which they're trying to build the school. So there's just got to be a compelling reason to get that information, because parents don't often respond to, well, we'll get more financial support if you fill this paper out. I don't care, but if it's going to get me a lunch and a breakfast and things like that, then there's more of a compelling reason to fill that paperwork out.
Would somebody like to make a motion?
Can I ask a quick question before we do that? Just looking ahead, how many of the members of this board are a part of the next application that we're reviewing?
Question. Just one? Just one.
I'm gonna make a motion that we invite them back for a second interview. I'll explain why in discussion.
Yeah, with the intention to be what? Where would the questioning go?
Along the lines of the budget. Greater clarity on the budget. That's not part of the motion, but the motion is the...
A second.
It's been properly moved and seconded, that we invite them back for a second interview next month. Any discussion?
So we would let
Okay, take that
them,
over.
Oh, I did. Just have it, sorry.
Love it.
Sorry.
My discussion is because I think that I have, as it relates to the budget, I think that there's some genuine concerns there that I have. I think maybe the second interview process allows us, as we know, to send them questions in advance where they put into writing their response. And I think maybe if they put into writing, we'd have greater clarity on, I feel I'd have greater clarity on getting the answers I'm really looking for. It's hard when you're at the podium and you're getting fired at with 3 or 4 questions at a time, and we're all fumbling through papers. So I think there's enough here for the perspective of need. We've already talked about the quality of the people involved. I have questions about the budget that I think a second interview might help me feel better about. I'm going to acknowledge this contract's problematic, and I don't know how we hash that out. And I don't know if the second interview resolves it, I'll be honest, but there's something here that I like the idea that the fact that they have a facility, that's different from the first school. The fact that they have a head of school who's ready to rock and roll, it is different.
Can I ask a question? How does, and this is more for staff, and if I'm supposed to know this off the top of my head, I apologize. How does this, say they get the second interview and it's denied, does that put them in a situation where then they cannot apply for accelerated, or will they still have a window of time to apply for accelerated?
Whatever your action is on this applicant, they have the ability to apply.
So the window will not have closed?
That is correct.
Okay.
May I ask a question of the applicant? No?
Yeah.
If you were not moved forward, will you lose the facility?
Now, that's an interesting question.
No, sir, we would not.
Okay, thank you.
They have stated their willingness to support us when we have the need. Great, so we're grateful for that.
I wasn't here for the first one, so just one more question before we get into the motion for me anyways. What's the onus on us with regard to this contract? Isn't that between the board and whatever that company is? So what responsibility does CSAP have for that contract being stellar?
Our responsibility is to make sure that because this is the first time we're approving this contract.
Mm-hmm.
So to make sure that it's a contract that favors the school and that is gonna work for the school. Because if it blows up later, then it's on us.
Because we approved it.
Yeah.
Got it.
And it will be, it'll be because, it'll be an approved contract, so it'll be whatever's in there.
Someone else could use the same contract.
Yeah, yeah. Are we in discussion?
We are.
Still on
So we
the
have a
motion?
motion and we have
We're
a
still in
second.
discussion on the motion?
Yeah.
I just want to say that, as I appreciate having more questions, I just don't feel I can support this school moving forward, even to second interview, because of that contract.
Yeah.
There's so many issues with that contract. Until that's fleshed out and we can't make material changes to the application, I'm not sure having him for a second interview is really gonna, for me, it's not gonna change.
And I kind of feel the same way. I'm encouraged by the fact that they have a facility, so they could still open. If they were to make it in the accelerated round, they could still open on time. The contract then would be fixed, which then supports the other two schools to reapply should they want to, without the same contract issues. But right now, just fixing the budget numbers would not be enough for me to be comfortable with it.
Is there any feedback that we're allowed to, if let's say it's denied moving forward, are we still able as a board to give feedback on the information that was to provide to guide them if they choose to go to accelerated?
If they're interested in our feedback.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that can be done in the illusion.
Okay.
I would appreciate the board taking the time for that. That would be, I think, all our hearts are in the same place, right? We all want to help kids. So you help us help kids, and we'd love to hear what you have to say. Thank you.
Any further discussion? All right, hearing none, we'll do roll call vote. We have the motion is to invite Liberty Charter Academy back for a second interview at the November, I'm sorry, it is November, at the December meeting.
All right, Terry Stoops,
Aye.
John Eldridge,
Nay.
Bruce Friend,
Aye.
Rita Hare,
Aye.
Lynn Kerger,
Nay.
Hilda's recused, Shelley Bullard,
Nay.
Cheryl Turner,
Nay.
Todd Godby.
Nay.
Okay, the motion does not pass. It is 5 against, 3-4.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate your time this afternoon.
So you need
No, we still have to do another
You need
motion.
another
motion. I'm
Another
sorry.
motion.
Yeah, sorry. Would someone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to not move Liberty Charter forward.
I'll second.
All right, Terry Stoops,
Nay.
John Eldridge,
Aye.
Bruce Friend,
Nay.
Rita Hare,
Nay.
Lynn Herber,
Yes.
Shelley Bullard,
Aye.
Cheryl Turner,
Aye.
Todd Gobby.
Aye.
All right, that one passes.
Thank you for your time here this morning. Next is lunch.
Yes, but you also need to do a motion to go into closed, please.
Oh, that's in here, I think.
Yeah.
Yes, I have emailed it to you.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
I move that we go into closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute, Section 143-318.11A3, to consult with our attorneys in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege between the attorneys and the public body, and this would occur after.
It's been properly moved and seconded that we go into closed session. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?